Slaughtering through American Horror, starting from the Witch's Coven. Slaughtering through American Horror, starting from the Witch's Coven. Chapter 41, Flame Blade. Just as the crocodile man dodged to the side, Rob simply threw away the pistol, stepped forward with his right foot, twisted his waist, and swung out his left arm holding the dagger. Squeak. The blade cut through the air, causing a sharp whistling sound. Under the crocodile man's astonished gaze, the knife flashed like a crescent moon, with a graceful arc, and slashed towards its chest with incredible speed, where it could not dodge in time. That's not all. Just as it felt a stinging pain in its body, it suddenly discovered that the knife light had turned into a fiery red. Control the flame. Rob's eyes flashed with fire. The ability that had not been used during the battle finally erupted at this moment. In an instant, a ball of wild flames wrapped around the blade. As the blade cut through the crocodile man's scales and pierced into his flesh, the burning flames turned into wisps of fire snakes and rushed into the crocodile man's body. In an instant, a scream much more painful than before came out of the crocodile's mouth again, and then it started flapping around in all directions like a madman, extremely manic. Rob drew his sword and stepped back. It can be seen that in addition to a long knife wound on the crocodile man's chest, the inside is completely black after being burned by the raging fire. The effect is good, it's worth it that I have been hiding until now. Rob smiled. If he had released the fire earlier, with his meager spiritual power, he could at most burn the crocodile man slightly, instead of burning his insides like he was doing now. Fortunately, the crocodile man has a strong physique. If it were anyone else, they would have been killed by Rob's vicious knife. The crocodile man's rage at this moment is only temporary. Soon, it stopped panting and looked very weak. Rob raised his dagger. Go on. There was a flash of silver light, and the blade attacked again. The crocodile man's pupils shrank and he stared at the dagger. Although there was no flame coming out of the opponent now, he still did not dare to be careless and fought against it carefully. However, one has a physique upgraded to 1.8, and the other has a severely damaged body. Not long after, Rob slimmed down the crocodile man's tail again and kicked him, sending the opponent crashing to the ground. It's time. Rob gripped the hilt with both hands and stabbed downward with all his might. Tear it up. Green blood is flowing. While the crocodile man held the blade tightly with his huge hands, he exerted his last bit of strength with murderous eyes. The bloody mouth that could swallow half of the body in one bite suddenly expanded to its maximum, revealing fangs that were much denser and sharper than those of a normal crocodile, and it bit towards Rob's head that was so close at hand like a rabbit. Rob was not panicked at all, and even said that he had planned the scene in advance. Spiritual, 0.3 spiritual, 0.5. Your breath stinks. Let me brush your teeth. Rob fixed his eyes on the crocodile man's bloody mouth. Boom. With the infusion of all his spiritual power, a flame much more violent than before instantly appeared in the crocodile man's mouth. The crocodile man suddenly froze, and then his whole body began to tremble violently. Soon, it stopped. Following the sound of a thump falling to the ground, there was no more movement. It's over. Rob let go of the dagger that was still tightly grasped by the alligator man. The plan went very smoothly. To prevent any further complications, Zoe needs to rescue Madison as soon as possible. In the previous confrontation, he deliberately used the dagger as bait to restrain the crocodile man's hands, forcing the opponent to use his only weapon, the crocodile's big mouth, in a desperate fight. The ability to control fire, passed down to the witches of Salem, is marked by the eyes. At such a close distance, the crocodile man opened his mouth, exposing his greatest weakness and naturally seeking death. A ray of light emerged from the crocodile man and was cast into the book of containment, showing that it was deader than dead. The pages of the book turn and a new page appears. No, 004. Name, Grimly Boding. Type, mutated alligator man. Status, contained. Ability, alligator transformation, control of alligators. Introduction, in order to avenge his wife, sister, and unborn child, a man who ate the flesh and blood of the legendary giant crocodile alive mutated into a crocodile man due to extreme anger and bloodthirstiness. He replaced the giant crocodile and became a new horror legend in the swamp. The new containment was completed, which meant Rob had 10 more days of leisure. That's not all, the crocodile man unexpectedly gave him 150 shelter points. There are many more than Heather and the Minotaurs before. I don't feel that the crocodile man is stronger than Heather and the Minotaur. If the shelter doesn't look at strength, then what does it look at? The extent of the evil deeds. In this regard, the crocodile man is indeed the winner. The only people who died at Heather's hands were the grave robbers and a few brave young men in the town. The Minotaur Bastion mostly serves as a comfort tool for the Voodoo Queen. The crocodile man has existed for a long time, and has had a constant stream of sacrifices from his subordinates. In all, it has the most blood on its hands. If you compare it this way, it does make sense. Of course, we cannot be arbitrary. Maybe it has something to do with strength, crime, and other things. There is still too little material. Rob shook his head. The crisis had not yet been resolved and he had no time to think about it. In addition, there is no need to be stingy with the shelter points. The right way is to turn them into immediate combat power to solve the remaining problems. Rob looked at the ability. He can learn both of the crocodile man's skills. However, crocodile transformation will turn you into something that is neither human nor ghost, and you can't change back, so just pass. Control crocodile is also useless, it just makes the crocodile obey you. It is far from being as good as the crocodile man named Old John at the gas station who could sense everything about all the crocodiles. No matter how strong a crocodile is, it cannot withstand a single bullet unless it fights underwater. Of course, if this ability were given to the professional swamp hunters who are very famous in New Orleans, they would definitely make a lot of money. Finally, Rob's gaze lingered on mind control and mind control. Considering that we will be dealing with a lot of gunmen next, and it does not overlap with killing skills such as control fire. He chose mind control. 80 points were crossed out, and under the influence of the Book of Containment, mind control was quickly under his control. Rob looked at the remaining points again. The previous shelter points had been used up during the fight with the crocodile man, and there were only 70 points left. Awakening the third ability costs 120 points, so let's not consider it for now. Rob allocated all the remaining points to physical strength and spiritual strength. Physique 1.8 Physique, 2.0. When we get here, the progress suddenly stops. Rob discovers he has an unexpected new power. Health, with a physical fitness of 2.0, you are immune to most diseases. Very good ability. Although there was no obvious improvement in his combat capability, Rob, who once suffered a serious illness and was bedridden for a week, knew the value of health. I think many people can relate to this. Chapter 42, Mind Control. Freeloading makes people happy. Especially when the ability to get something for free is very good, the joy is doubled. Afterwards, Rob tried to continue adding points to physique, but was reminded that after the attribute reaches 2.0, every 0.1 increase in the attribute will cost double the cost, that is, 20 shelter points. He paused and turned to invest the remaining containment points into spirituality. In this case, the personal information is updated as follows. No, 000. Name, Rob. Type, human. Physique, 2.0. Spiritual, 1.0. Abilities, fire control, mind control, health. Introduce : Feeling a stronger force than ever before, Rob retrieved his pistol and dagger, cut off the crocodile man's head and tied it around his waist, then climbed up the hillside. It's time to return for help. Crackling. In the dark night, raging flames raged through the dense forest. As time went by, a vast sea of fire was formed, with flames shooting up into the sky, illuminating the night sky red. Fortunately, this is a swamp wetland with plenty of water, and coupled with terrain restrictions, it does not cause a major fire. Even so, it caused great trouble to Jonah and other cultists who were hunting them. Although Madison and Zoe had the upper hand at the beginning and achieved great results. But as their own magic power gradually dried up and they were brainwashed again, even though half of the cultists were killed, there were still many who were no longer as arrogant as before. They moved cautiously between the trees, firing cold shots and closing in on the enemy with an encirclement. The situation was gradually turning around. If it weren't for the sea of fire in front of them, the battle might have ended faster. Never underestimate the power of technology. No matter how powerful your magic is, a bullet that cannot be seen by the naked eye can take your life. Otherwise, ordinary people like witch hunters would not have been tirelessly hunting witches for hundreds of years, instead of being wiped out by them. Compared to the witches of the Dark Ages, Madison and Zoe are undoubtedly immature. In contrast, the cultists before them were not as professional as the witch hunters. Although they are extremely pious to the crocodile people, it does not mean that everyone is brave, fearless, and self-sacrificing. Just like a young man named Mike, who did not run away despite the crocodile man's roar and Jonah's call. But after witnessing his acquaintances being hit by bullets, burned by fire, or having their necks broken, he still hid at the end of the team. Occasionally, he would follow the crowd and fire a shot forward, then immediately shrink behind a big tree, praying not to be seen by the witch's devilish eyes. But he was guarding against the front and not paying attention to the back. Click. The sound of footsteps on fallen leaves could be heard behind me. Mike thought it was a companion coming over and turned around to ask without paying any attention. Sudden. His eyes froze, his hands moved, he pointed the muzzle of the double-barreled shotgun at his chin and pulled the trigger. After a bang, the head shattered like a watermelon falling to the ground. This one was successful. Rob walked out from the darkness, ready to finish off the enemy at any time, and said lightly. He was testing his mind control abilities. Mike was not the first, but he was the only one who successfully committed suicide under his influence. The so-called mind control does not mean permanently changing a person's mind. With Rob's ability, the most he could do was affect the recipient for 1 or 2 seconds. In addition, the will of the recipient and the things implanted in the recipient's mind and asked him to do will also affect the duration of mind control. For example, when Madison asked him to lick her, he quickly broke free after being licked. Just like the other experimenters just now, Rob asked them to shoot themselves. Except for Mike, who had been hiding in the back and was obviously frightened, everyone else refused at the last moment and woke up early. Under the stimulation of death, even if Rob instilled in them the idea that nothing would happen after shooting, they would question and resist this idea that went too far against common sense, forcing Rob to finish off the enemy in order to avoid alerting them. Rob was not disappointed. After all, sometimes taking a detour can be just as effective. With a 2.0 physique, he moved among the trees like a ghost. He soon discovered 2 more cultists. Aim at a person and initiate mind control. In an instant, when the cultist who was the target looked at his companion, he suddenly found that the other party had turned into a witch. He was so frightened that he adjusted the muzzle of the gun without thinking and shot at the other party. The next second, he looked dazed, and when he looked again, the witch was no longer there, replaced by his companion lying in a pool of blood. "Oh my God! What's going on?" he said in disbelief. "Go to hell and ask your God." "Oh, I almost forgot, it got swallowed by my book." Rob walked out of the darkness and killed the opponent with 1 knife. He rubbed his brows, having contributed to the Earth's population crisis. Although his spirituality had improved a lot, it was still not enough after several consumptions. I really envy the Supreme Witch's mana. Speaking of the Supreme Witch fake, I don't know if I can inherit her qualifications. Fiona's delicately made up but old face flashed through Rob's mind. Don't be too perverted. She can be your grandmother now. Rob shook his head and looked at the remaining cultists. It was time to end the battle quickly. It's not like a humanoid Gundam fighting alone against many enemies. But, hey. Your great God has come to comfort you, come and see. Rob shouted loudly as he threw the crocodile head that he had specially cut off and brought with him into the crowd of cultists. The cultists who heard the noise looked over subconsciously. Then, they saw the crocodile man's huge head, which appeared particularly clear under the reflection of the sea of fire. Thump! The crocodile man's head fell from the air and landed right at the feet of Jonah, the leader of the cult. The latter stared at it blankly, his mind went blank, and his usually eloquent mouth couldn't utter a single word. Until someone shouted in horror. God is dead. It was as if the dam had been pulled. The faith of all the cultists collapsed rapidly at this moment. How can God die? God cannot die. Impossible. Impossible. This must be an illusion. A witch's trick. Where is God? Why hasn't he shown up in such a long time? God is really dead. Disbelief, doubt, pain, despair, confusion, panic, etc. permeate the hearts of all cultists. God is dead, and no one has the courage to continue fighting the enemy who killed God. When the first cultist turned back and ran away in panic. After just a moment's hesitation, the second and third people quickly followed. Soon, it turned into a massive rout for everyone. This even includes the cult leader Jonah. Chapter 43, The Witch's Victory over the Cultists. Everything has its limits. Faith can bring people infinite courage. However, if it collapses, it will be an unprecedented disaster. Just like now. After the crocodile man's head was brought in and performed a great service. In the following time, Rob no longer needed to hide himself. He chased after the defeated cultists and easily harvested one life after another. No one turned back to resist. Even if they have guns, even if they outnumber them. Those who were caught up by Rob and could not escape could only cry and beg for their lives, completely lacking the courage they had in the past to fight against the crowd alone. Rob finally understood why, throughout history, the greatest casualties in a war often occurred when one side was defeated. He showed no mercy. Over the years, every cultist whose hands have been stained with blood deserves to die. As for handing it over to the police, forget it. Not to mention how long the lawsuit will take, would it expose the fact that they are wizards? Therefore, let me, the loving father of the American people, personally uphold justice. He shot the man in front of him in the head. When Rob looked forward, he saw a bald head shining in the moonlight. Rob greeted happily, "Boss, don't be in a hurry to leave. Thank you for guiding us to such a surprising and adventurous place." The bald boss, Jonah, trembled all over. No longer as friendly as before, he didn't even dare to respond and just ran forward desperately. But, I heard footsteps getting closer behind me. He finally couldn't help but look back and shouted in horror. "Devil! The other side!" When they found that the enemy was in chaos and began to flee, Madison and Zoe guessed that it was most likely Rob's doing. They didn't just sit there and picked up the stolen hunting rifles, rushed out and beat the enemy to relieve the pain of being besieged. "I surrender. Don't kill me." An old man broke his leg while running away. He fell to the ground wailing in pain. He heard footsteps behind him and raised his hand in panic. "The crocodile man isn't as magical as you said in the store, is he?" A voice sounded. The old man, old John, looked up when he heard the words and found that the person who was speaking was the girl who was standing in front of the crocodile statue at the gas station during the day. He begged for mercy quickly. Indeed, indeed. I am far inferior to you. Please spare my life. I am old and will not live long anyway. Zoe raised her shotgun, shook her head and said, "It's just right. Let's judge your crimes before you die of old age." No. Bang. It's all over. Zoe raised her gun, calmly stepped over old John's body, and continued to chase forward. Although she is a pure and cute girl, after experiencing the blood and fire tonight, she is ruthless when she takes action. You know, she is the evil witch in people's eyes. The pursuit in the dense forest continues. It wasn't long before Rob, Zoe, and Madison reunited. That's great, Rob. Looking at the crocodile head that Rob had tied around his waist again after throwing it away, Madison praised it with bright eyes. Zoe's eyes also sparkled. Who doesn't want her boyfriend to be strong and powerful? If the timing wasn't wrong, she would have rushed forward to express her excitement. Rob patted the crocodile head that he had taken as a trophy and was going to hang on the wall when he got back. He smiled and said, "I'll leave the compliments for later. Let's get rid of the remaining few people first." The cult group of about 40 or 50 people now has only a few big and small cats left. Rob, Zoe, and Madison were still chasing when suddenly a series of terrified screams were heard in front of them, but soon the sound quickly died down. Then, a familiar voice sounded. "Shit. I finally see you guys." Rob looked and was relieved. It was Queenie. In the dark, she has naturally concealed skin, and if she hadn't made a sound, she wouldn't have been noticed for a moment. She strode over and a deep wound on her neck could be seen healing on its own, and she was clutching a dagger in her hand. Obviously, the fate of those last few people is clear. Zoe quickly ran to Queenie and asked with concern, "Queenie, are you okay?" Queenie shook her head first, then said in a very unhappy tone, "I'm fine, it's just that my pants are wet." "Shit. The guy who attacked me chose to knock me out while I was using the toilet. How shameless." Zoe wanted to laugh but held it back. "So, you killed him?" "Of course." Queenie said, still unsatisfied, "When I woke up, I found myself tied up in a wooden house. The guy who attacked me put a dagger against my neck and asked me to be quiet. I took the initiative to wipe my neck with the dagger, and asked him to be quiet." Queenie tells her story. Pretty much what Rob had guessed. Queenie went out alone and was hit with a club. In order to meet their reproduction needs, the cultists will not kill her, but will just control her. However, these people underestimated Queenie's ability and were killed by him. "When I heard the gunshots and the flames, I knew you were here, so I chased you all the way here. Then I met those guys and killed them," Queenie said finally. After she was safe, she did not try to escape, but was ready to come over to help, but she did not expect that Rob and his men had almost dealt with the situation. Okay. The game of witches versus cults is over. The witches win. Madison threw down the useless shotgun, dusted off his hands, and announced loudly in the tone of a winner. Zoe wasn't as excited as she was. Thinking more, she looked at the bodies scattered all over the ground, frowned and asked Rob, what should we do with these bodies?" "Rob, throw it into the swamp. It is still necessary to kill and bury the body. Especially when there were dozens of corpses at once. If we really leave it alone and someone finds out, it will definitely be big news. Besides, there's no need to waste the burial ground in the swamp. Even if the matter is exposed by then, given the efficiency of the American police, it will take an unknown amount of time to investigate it thoroughly. But that's for tomorrow. It was pitch dark and it would be very unlucky if you accidentally fell into the swamp after throwing so many corpses. In addition, they were all very tired after fighting for so long, so they returned to the camp they had set up and prepared to rest for a night. "Oh Quinny, change your pants quickly, they stink." "BCH, why don't you look in the mirror and see what you look like now? You look like you just emerged from a pile of mud. Change your whole body right now. You too, I have a box of mineral water here, do you need any?" Listening to the witches' quarrel, Rob dragged away the horse-faced man who had been shot in the head by him in the camp to prevent the bad smell from affecting his sleep. After simply changing his clothes, he went back to the tent to rest. While he was half asleep, there was another person beside him. Faintly, it seemed that there was another person approaching. "My nose smells a familiar scent." "Never mind, go to sleep." Chapter 44, Big Eagle Soaking in Wine. The next day, a scream broke the morning calm. "Madison! Why are you here?" Zoe exclaimed. She had just woken up and wanted to stay in the tent for a while, but there was one more person in the tent. She stood up and looked around, only to see Madison sleeping soundly on the other side. Zoe questioned Madison loudly. Madison, who was awakened from her sweet dream, did not panic at all. Under Zoe's murderous gaze, she yawned naturally, stood up and stretched openly, then pretended to be surprised. "Isn't this my tent? Oh, I went to the wrong place. I'm so sorry, I was so tired last night and my eyes were blurry. But I had a great sleep. I envy you, Zoe." Zoe's eyes widened at the perfunctory explanation and the wolfish ambition revealed in the words. Although she has a good temper, it would be abnormal for her not to be angry at this moment. Sparks were seen flashing inside the tent and the temperature was rising. Madison's words instantly broke Zoe's defense. "Rob is in great shape." "Zoe, how are you guys doing?" Zoe was stunned. Then, I felt inexplicably guilty. At this time, Madison, who had just remembered, apologized quickly. "I'm sorry, I almost forgot how special you are." "How pitiful." Zoe couldn't help but lower her head. "This is not the Celestial Empire. Unlike some girls who are good at tea art, who call themselves boyfriends or girlfriends, but actually keep you hanging on purpose and never let you succeed. In a situation like Zoe's, if it had been delayed for too long, most people would have packed up their bags and run away long ago." Madison warned again, "Be careful of the women out there. If they find out what's good about Rob, they won't hesitate to snatch him away from you." "Are you sure you're not talking about yourself?" Zoe glanced at Madison speechlessly. Madison had a very calm expression on her face. She raised her perfectly trimmed eyebrows, and suddenly leaned close to Zoe's ear and said in the tone of an old driver, "Do you want me to teach you?" Zoe blushed, but still listened attentively. As for the previous questioning and conflicts, they had almost been forgotten in Madison's beating and cutting. Rob listened. "I have to say, Madison is a BCH in Queenie's eyes. But it feels really good to have a BCH who only cares about you." Seeing that the two women had almost finished their conversation, Rob stood up and greeted them. "Hey, beauties, good morning." "Good morning, Rob," Zoe and Madison responded in unison. "What are you talking about?" "Nothing." Zoe answered first. Madison on the side raised her beautiful eyebrows at Rob. Seeing this, Zoe's eyes moved slightly, but she didn't say anything else. Days like this are wonderful. It's a pity that his leisure time is only about 1 month, Rob sighed. It would be great if there wasn't that mission indicator. Rob shook his head. At this moment, he would not be stupid enough to ask Madison why she appeared here in such a cool outfit. He stood up, patted the two women and said, "Let's go and deal with those bodies. Rob, go to the crocodile man first." Madison said suddenly. Rob asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" "I heard from those people last night that the crocodile man can actually do that. I want to go see it with my own eyes and cut it off by the way." Madison said with a wave of his hand excitedly. Rob moved slightly away from Madison. He was somewhat tempted to overturn his previous idea. Zoe looked at Madison in shock. You want this too? Madison rolled her eyes at Zoe and said, you're surprised by what you've seen. I heard that stuff soaked in wine is very effective for men. This is something that came from China. Rob, don't you know? Madison looked at Rob again and explained, if you sell it to those men in Hollywood, you will definitely make a fortune. I only know about making wine with snakes, but I've never heard of making wine with eagles. Rob said he was ignorant. But no matter what, Madison just had to take it back and collect it. As for making money, it's also a good thing to cheat those Hollywood idiots. Rob takes Madison to the Crocodile Man's burial site. Zoe went along. While monitoring Madison, she was also somewhat curious about the structure of the Crocodile Man. When passing by Queenie's tent, Madison deliberately shouted at her to get up. The result was that after some fighting, the four of them went together. The sea of fire from last night had already gone out by itself, leaving only a charred ground. I think it won't be long before everything returns to normal thanks to the powerful healing power of the swamp wetlands. Accompanying a group of witches who wanted to see the eagle, Rob came to the hillside where he fought with the Crocodile Man. Fortunately, the headless body of the Crocodile Man was not damaged. The commotion last night caused the animals in the area to run away in panic. It really exists. When he came to the Crocodile Man's corpse, Madison didn't care about the stench and dirt. He picked up a branch, and after a few movements, he actually picked out the destination of the strip. Although Zoe and Queenie were not as direct as Madison, they also looked on curiously. Americans here learn a lot of physiology classes early on in school, and coupled with cultural influence, they are not as shy as Oriental girls. It's a little weird, but it definitely fits the curiosity of those people in Hollywood. Madison commented without any emotion. After all, after climbing high mountains again and again, I have lost interest in looking at lower mountains. Coincidentally, Zoe also looked back after watching. Rob straightened his chest. At this moment, he was somewhat grateful for the book of shelter. Certainly. After all, it's because of my good foundation. Knife. Madison then reached out to Rob. Rob came back to his senses, glanced at the Palin sword on his waist that had brought him great military exploits last night, and quickly shook his head to refuse. He wanted to continue using this excellent weapon for chopping people, and he couldn't let it go to waste here. Finally, Madison took the dagger from Queenie, and with a flick of the knife, he put the spoils into the prepared glass bottle. Just wait until you get back and soak it in wine. Chapter 45, The Swamp Witch. Plop. Plop. Rob and Zoe threw corpses into the swamp one by one. After splashing some water, they quickly sank. In the future, they may be eaten by crocodiles or sink into the mud, never to see the light of day again. Perhaps, only when a severe drought that occurs once in 1,000 years strikes this place can it reappear in the world. Of course, by then there would be far more than just a few dozen bodies. If Rob could think of an excellent place to bury the bodies, how could the black and white people who had lived nearby for hundreds of years not know it? This is much safer than digging a hole and sinking it into a lake. There's only one batch left. After throwing the bodies on the boat, Rob and Zoe paddled back to the shore. Madison, who was in charge of the land transportation, took a look at the last body dragged by Queenie, and after reminding Rob and the others, he was about to use his mind to move the last few bodies to the boat. A female voice suddenly came from behind. "Did you kill these people?" Madison was startled and turned her head quickly, only to see a young girl in a tattered skirt who looked a little nervous appearing here at some point. "Do you know them?" Madison's eyes turned cold, and he turned his palm slightly, ready to take action if there was any disagreement. Having killed so many people last night, she didn't mind killing one more to avoid unnecessary trouble caused by the news leaking out. The girl with long wavy golden hair and dark eyeshadow shook her head first, then looked at the corpses on the ground with a look of sorrow and said, "I don't know them. But life shouldn't be erased so hastily. They should have enjoyed more time, good food, and music, and experienced the beauty of the world. If you knew what they did to us last night, you wouldn't feel sad about the death of these scumbags. Believe me, their death is the greatest contribution they can make to other people and to the world." Queenie, who also noticed the stranger, walked over and explained, "It's rare that you agree with me." Madison glanced at Queenie, then turned back to look at the strange girl and said with a smile, "Want to learn to fight for justice like the superheroes in the movies? This is not a wise choice, girl. You clearly saw us murderers dumping the bodies. The best thing you should do now is to hide, instead of ending up with them. Tell me, how do you want to die? Burned? Shot? Knife killed?" Madison waved her hand, and the shotgun and dagger on the ground flew up, pointing at the strange girl. In her eyes, she would not let this girl go, whether she was dead or alive. In that case, there's no harm in exposing your abilities, and you can also see the girl's reaction. Madison looked over with amusement. Sure enough, seeing the floating shotgun and dagger, the strange girl was very surprised and said, "Which? That's right." Madison snapped his fingers. "It just so happens that the Great Mother of Darkness needs a young and energetic female sacrifice. Since you have offered yourself to me, I will sacrifice you." Mother of Darkness? Sacrifice? Witches also have people to serve. Unexpectedly, when she heard that she was going to be sacrificed, the strange girl did not show any fear, regret, despair or the like. Instead, she showed an expression of strange confusion. "It's as if I haven't figured anything out." Seeing this, Madison was wondering whether he should use more force to make the other party more aware of the reality. The boat reached the shore, and Rob, who came up to them, interrupted and said, "Okay, Madison, stop scaring people." Then he turned his head and looked at the strange girl with surprise in his eyes. "I didn't expect that another witch of Salem blood would appear here and get to know everyone in this way." Rob greeted the girl and explained, "What Queenie said just now is right. These people are cultists who have shed the blood of many innocent people. Last night they turned their knives on us. They just didn't expect there were witches here, and we killed them in return." Rob spoke patiently, and then showed the crocodile man's corpse that had not yet been processed to the other party. "The legendary Crocodile King, the Lord of the Swamp. When I lived in the swamp, I heard a lot of killing and crying caused by it. I didn't expect it to die here. I believe what you said. Misty Day, it's nice to meet you." Witnessing the death of the crocodile man, it was like a huge stone falling. Misty, a girl in a good mood, greeted everyone with a smile. Madison crossed her arms and pouted, "Trying to infiltrate us so soon? That won't do. Rob, are you sure she can keep this secret?" "Don't worry. I'll keep it a secret," Misty assured him before Rob responded, "Actually, I'm a witch just like you." "Witch?" Except for Rob, Madison, Queenie, and Zoe all looked surprised. "Yes." Misty nodded repeatedly. To prove herself, she looked around and found a dead fish with its belly upside down floating in a puddle. She immediately walked over, took out the dead fish and held it in her palm. Madison, Zoe, and Queenie looked over curiously. After a few breaths, amidst Misty's friendly smile, the fish in her palm suddenly jumped up and down. The dead fish is actually alive. The stunned Queenie expressed everyone's thoughts. Even though he already knew about Misty's abilities, Rob was still shocked when he saw her coming back to life. Resurrection is one of the abilities of the Salem Witch's 7 arrays. It can revive the dead, but it has many limitations and even requires the caster to consume his own vitality. But Misty was different. Born with this ability, she has a deeper level of attainment and suffers much less backlash, which can be called the true hand of God. It is no wonder that after priests and religious fanatics discovered her peculiarity, they stigmatized her as a devil and burned her to death. Simply because she had violated the domain that belonged only to God. Unfortunately, he is not affected by the ability to bring the dead back to life. Rob knew that once he died, his soul would be collected by the Book of Shelter and become number 000. Even the Supreme Witch cannot snatch the souls contained in this extremely special book. Rob looked at Misty, who could be described as a human resurrection pool, and felt very sorry. At this moment, Zoe remembered something and said in surprise, "Misty Day? This name sounds familiar. Are you the young witch that Myrtle mentioned, who was burned alive by a group of believers because her ability to resurrect was discovered?" When Myrtle came to pick her up, when explaining the current survival crisis of the witches, she specifically gave the example of a girl who was about her age and was burned to death in the name of an evil witch, but was not discovered in time by the witch group and suffered a tragic end. Zoe, who had just discovered she was a witch, was impressed. Chapter 46, Halloween Eve. Misty grabbed her messy long hair, thought for a moment, and nodded. "It seems that I am the only witch who has been burned recently who fits the description." Zoe was surprised and said, "You are not burned." "I'm sorry, I mean how come you are fine now?" "Who knows? When I woke up and found I still had breath, I smeared the burns with feces. Look. There it is." Misty took out a ball of gray, sticky feces from her backpack and excitedly handed it to everyone. "There are tillandsias and alligator poop all over the Louisiana swamps, and they have great healing properties. Nature has a way of doing things, so I got well pretty quickly." "Oh my God." Madison covered her nose and stepped back. Rob, Zoe, and Queenie were too embarrassed to be so rude, so they had to force a smile and look at the feces so close to them. Misty, who was unaware of herself, or rather preferred to live in her own world, enthusiastically introduced her treasure to everyone, then took it back and said in a good mood, "I knew I wasn't the only witch, there must be someone like me. I didn't know how to find you. Fortunately, when I was meditating in the forest today, I felt something calling me. Although I don't know what it is, I know I must respond to the call. As a result, I met you. I'm grateful for the calling, now I know I'm not alone anymore." After that, she sang a cheerful song to herself. Her singing voice is like a silver bell across the night sky. Don't you want to love her? She is like a flying bird, in control of her own life. Where will her love fly to? Looking at Misty singing and dancing there, Zoe and her group looked at each other, always feeling that the other party seemed very different from them. When the song ended, Zoe stepped forward and invited with a polite smile, "Misty, would you like to go back to the Witch Academy with us? Principal Cordelia welcomes every new witch. There, you don't have to worry about being threatened by the outside world. In addition, the Academy will also help you better control your abilities." To her surprise, Misty shook her head without hesitation and said, "No. I still prefer living here. Besides, if I follow you, I feel like I'll get into trouble, big trouble." Zoe wanted to persuade her, but Madison stopped her and said, "Come on, if she doesn't want to go, why is she begging? To be honest, if the council hadn't forced me to come here, I wouldn't want to stay any longer. This place is too far from Los Angeles, and I don't know if anyone will recognize me when I return to Hollywood." "Don't worry, not many people know you now." Queenie interjected in time. "Shit." While the two girls were arguing again, Rob found a piece of paper and a pen, wrote down the address of the Witch Academy and his phone number on it, and handed it to Misty, saying, "If you run into any trouble or want to go out and have fun, you can go to this address. We're there most of the time. If it's inconvenient, you can call me. Are they okay?" Misty looked at Madison and Queenie, who were arguing more and more with some concern, took the paper without refusing, and asked. Rob looked back and said calmly, "Don't worry, this is their way of enhancing friendship. Just get used to it." To improve friendship? That's really strange. Misty shook her head, retracted her gaze and looked at Rob in front of her. Suddenly she sniffed her nose, with a hint of intoxication in her eyes, and said, "Your breath of life is so strong, no wonder you can kill the Lord of the Swamp who despises life. Can you come to my place to play? Do you like music? I can teach you to sing. Also, the food I cook is delicious." Possessing the ability to bring the dead back to life, Misty has a strong sense of life and death. Rob was the most alive person she had ever met. She had an immense love for life and instinctively wanted to get close to it. This is also the reason why she completely ignored Zoe, whose face was getting darker and darker, and directly told Rob her address and extended a warm invitation. If Zoe had felt a little regretful before about Misty not joining the Witch Academy, she definitely didn't feel that way now, and was even a little happy. Madison, who was eyeing her eagerly, was enough to worry her. What would happen if there was another Misty? Rob was a little confused at first about Misty's special look. Then, after thinking for a moment, he almost understood that it was caused by his 2.0 physique. With his girlfriend by his side, Rob wouldn't be stupid enough to say the wrong thing. After exchanging a few simple courtesies, Madison and Queenie stopped their friendly conversation out of exhaustion, fearing that staying here too long would attract attention, and so the two sides parted ways. Watching Misty's departing back, Rob asked the girls to clean up the remaining corpses. To be on the safe side, they burned the crocodile man's headless body to prevent other creatures from eating his flesh and blood and becoming a new generation of crocodile men. Only then did they drive away after this unpleasant thing happened. After a democratic vote, the group did not immediately return to New Orleans. Having been disturbed last night and feeling that the camping trip was not complete, they turned back to the originally planned destination, where they happily played the whole day without any surprises, and then finally went home. It is worth noting that under the double pressure of Madison and the newly emerged Misty, Zoe took the initiative to try the method that Madison taught her during the day on Rob that night. The next day, when Rob drove back to downtown New Orleans, he unexpectedly discovered that there were many more pumpkin lanterns on the streets, and scarecrows, skulls, spider webs, black cats and other things were hung in front of many shops. Seeing that a few people on the street couldn't wait to dress up as zombies, vampires, witches, Frankenstein, etc., Rob suddenly realized, so today is Halloween. Halloween, to be exact, Zoe corrected. Compared to the real Halloween, Halloween Eve is the most lively time of the festival. Adults put on scary and weird makeup, wear strange clothes, parade in the community and on the streets, and hold some kind of unique party. Children will dress up as cute ghosts and knock on doors from house to house, asking for candy, otherwise they will play tricks. This is a carnival for the whole nation. Very popular among Westerners, but not so popular in the East. Just looking at the three women beside him who were calm, Rob asked with some surprise. "Why aren't you excited at all?" Chapter 47, Werewolves vs Vampires. Why aren't you excited at all? Rob was a little surprised when he saw the three women who showed no excitement at all. It's normal that I'm not interested in Western festivals like Halloween, but why are these three people who were born and raised here not interested in it? I'm tired. Queenie stretched his huge body on the seat and said weakly. Boring. Madison, who was browsing the internet on her phone, said without even looking up. Zoe told the truth in detail. I used to like dressing up as a wicked witch to scare people. Now that I'm a real witch, there's no point in pretending anymore. To put it bluntly, after seeing real witches, evil spirits, mutant crocodile people, etc., it is no longer interesting to look back at these people's shabby costumes. After all, How can a fake compare to the real thing? Madison suddenly spoke up, but the ghost party tonight is still pretty good. Rob, do you want to go and have some fun? You dress up as a werewolf and I dress up as a vampire. How about we continue the 1,000-year bloody battle? Werewolves versus vampires? 1,000 years of bloody battle? Madison, you're getting bolder and bolder lately, you know? Rob glanced at Zoe, who had an expressionless face, and coughed twice. He suppressed his eager heart and said righteously, "No, I'm too tired these 2 days. I'd better have a good rest when I go back." Zoe's face relaxed when she heard this, and then she turned to Madison and advised with concern, "Think about the fraternity party, Madison." The smile that had just appeared on Madison's lips suddenly froze. A witch and a Hollywood star, being bewitched by a small-time punk is a stain that she will never be able to wash away in her life. That fraternity party? What happened? What happened? Queenie, as if she had smelled something, propped herself up and asked excitedly. She was happy to collect any embarrassing things that happened to Madison. Nothing. Madison stopped him quickly. Zoe watched all this with a chuckle. Just like that, amid the noise of fighting, Rob drove back to the Witch Academy, just in time to see Spaulding happily setting up a scarecrow outside the court. When he noticed them coming back, he instantly returned to his original stiff self. It would be more appropriate to put up a statue of a wicked witch outside, Spaulding. After Rob made the suggestion, he led the witches into the house without caring whether the other party responded or not. As soon as he pushed the door open, Queenie shouted to Delphi, who was cleaning the hall, "Delphi, go and prepare some pudding and yogurt for me, I'm hungry." Delphi's face instantly fell. "Oh God. It's only been a few days, can't I rest a little more? By the way, please help us cut some fruit." Rob, who didn't eat much in the morning, said. Delphi glared at Rob indignantly. She had not forgotten that when Bastion attacked a few days ago, the other party forced her to be a meat shield. No matter how much you glare at me, you still have to do what you have to do. Unlike Queenie, who has sharp words but never actually does anything violent, Delphi knows exactly how ruthless Rob, who has a bright smile on his face, can be when he really takes action. "Welcome back. How was camping?" At the dining table, Nan, who heard the noise, still holding her love guide, ran over and asked with a smile. Zoe thought about it and responded, not bad, quite exciting." Nan looked at her, and after a few seconds of silence, he nodded in agreement and said, "You guys are really having an exciting time." Apparently, she had just read Zoe's inner thoughts and knew the inside story. Although reading minds is a very unpleasant ability, it is still very good to have it here. At least we don't have to waste our breath on it. Madison picked up the strawberry on the plate and ate it in one bite. "Nan, how have you and the boy next door been progressing these days?" "Very good." Nan responded with a smile. Then, she looked at Madison and said, "I wasn't lying. He said he felt comfortable with me. He liked me very much." "Kissing?" "Not yet. His mom is too strict, and the time we spend alone together is too short." "Do I need your help?" "No. You'll only cause trouble." Without giving Madison a chance to speak, Nan quickly answered the question on her mind. Madison rolled her eyes and finally said, "I take it back. Mind reading is annoying no matter where it is placed. It just made me look like an idiot. What a bunch of weird girls. In my time, you would all have been burned to death." Delphi, who came over with a tray and saw this scene, said to herself, "Madison won't spoil Delphi." She already knew the other party's identity and responded, "You know what? A guy like you who is over 200 years old and still alive would definitely be put on the operating table for dissection and research in this era. The White House and those old guys on Wall Street are very interested in people like you." Delphi was suddenly speechless. As expected, evildoers need to be punished by evildoers. Rob smiled. Listening to the children playing outside, he suddenly remembered something and asked, "Delphi, are you ready for candy tonight?" "Candy? Why do we need to prepare candy?" Delphi asked, puzzled. "Today is Halloween Eve." Rob was also puzzled. As a foreigner, he knew that on this night there would be children coming to ask for candy or to play tricks. Americans themselves should know this. Delphi wondered, shouldn't I be allowed to light a bonfire and serve food to the demons to keep them away from us? You know, evil spirits will walk the earth that night. If we can't protect ourselves, the dead will wake up and disasters will follow. Rob was stunned for a moment and asked the people around him, what did she mean? Madison and Queenie looked at each other and said they didn't understand either. Zoe, who had listened carefully in class, replied, "That's how people celebrated Halloween a long time ago. But it's different now. Bonfires are replaced by pumpkin lanterns, and serving sacrifices is replaced by candy." Zoe explained to Delphi in detail how to celebrate Halloween in the new era. Rob was listening on the side, when suddenly his eyes flickered and some vague memories came to his mind. It seems like, what's going to happen on Halloween? I can't remember some of them clearly. Too much time has passed, and the episodes I've watched are never marked with specific dates, and often a long time can pass in one episode. Plus, there are far more people in this world than just witches, and my own intrusion has had an impact. The situation has already changed beyond recognition. Rob generally doesn't pay much attention to past memories. However, Halloween seems to be a little special. After thinking for a while, he asked. Chapter 48, Night Parade of 100 Demons. "Where's Fiona?" Rob asked. Delphi, who was shocked by the change in Halloween customs, replied subconsciously, "She went out with Cordelia, saying that they wanted to have a mother-daughter emotional exchange journey." "In that case, the problem isn't with Fiona." "Who is that?" Rob thought of another powerful person in New Orleans who was also very dissatisfied with the Salem witches, Voodoo Queen Mary. Delphi, who was buried alive by her for more than 180 years, was found here, and her former lover Bastien also died here. If I don't retaliate, it would be against the other person's character. Thinking of this, Rob's face changed. He remembered. At the same time, inside a hair salon in the black neighborhood of New Orleans, Voodoo Queen Mary, who had long dreadlocks and wore 2 huge golden earrings, was ordering her subordinates to prepare various props for the ceremony with great anger. At the side, her biological sister, Chantal, was still trying to persuade her, "It's dangerous enough outside. Marie, the peace we have worked so hard to achieve should not be broken like this. Perhaps we can resolve this issue through communication." "We broke the peace?" "No." Mary said angrily, "It was them. It was those white witches who started it. They dug up the Delphi that I buried with my own hands. That BCH Fiona even came to me to show off. And Bastion. My poor Bastion. Why didn't they think of peace when they cut off his head and sent it to me?" "But..." Chantal tried to persuade. But Marie interrupted impatiently, "Stop talking. Chantal, I know you mean well. But everything is over, the peace has been broken. If you don't fight back, you might as well lie in bed and wait for death. Now is the crucial moment. I don't have time to argue with you. Either follow me or oppose me. If it's the latter, I advise you to stay out of my way." Mary warned her sister with a cold look. Under the pressure of the Voodoo Queen, Chantal finally bowed her head. "I choose to follow you." "Very good." Mary nodded with satisfaction. "Go get ready." After enduring for so long, Halloween is finally here. Although her heart was filled with hatred, Mary, who knew clearly what era this was not overwhelmed by the provocation when she received the bull's head delivered by Fiona. She was just waiting for today to come. With those guys in strange costumes as cover, I will teach those immature white witches a good lesson. The voodoo queen's eyes were full of bloodlust. It's time to sprinkle the secret chamber with the blood of the white witch that she has been thirsting for so long. Night falls. Witches, zombies, ghosts, werewolves, vampires, perverted killers, and even cosplay characters from various movies, TV shows and anime walked out of their homes and appeared in the streets and alleys of New Orleans, officially starting the night parade of 100 demons. Amidst their laughter and deliberate screams, they did not know that real evil spirits had joined them. Let's get started. Inside the secret room, Mary looked at the complicated voodoo rituals that had been drawn on the ground, and as the believers beside her beat strange and eerie drums, she strode into the formation, opened the witch box that had been prepared long ago, took out a thick white python from it, and wrapped it around her neck. Amid the python's cries, she took out another poisonous snake and cut it with the dagger in her hand. Smelly blood quickly flowed out. Boom! Flames appeared out of nowhere. One after another, difficult to understand spells containing inexplicable mysterious power came out of Mary's mouth, spanning more than 10 kilometers and affecting a cemetery near the Witch Academy. Bang! 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 Black and rotten arms stretched out from the ground. Soon, corpses that had been dead for many years and were now revived by Mary's spell crawled out of the cemetery and headed towards the Witch Academy with the rage of their masters. Ding dong! The doorbell rang. Delphi opened the door, and a bunch of little ghosts immediately laughed and said, "Trick or treat if you don't give me candy." Delphi took out the candy plate that she had prepared and handed it over while warning, "Don't be greedy. Each person can only take one." No one listened to her. Soon, the little devils each ran away with handfuls of candy. A bunch of little robbers. Delphi closed the door angrily and took out a candy to reward himself. In the living room, Rob was playing Texas Hold'em with Zoe, Madison, and Queenie, with Nan, whose ability was too poor, acting as the dealer. After realizing that there was a high possibility of being attacked tonight, he naturally would not let the combat power around him go. Like Madison, who was originally planning to go out for a drink, was forcibly pulled back by him. Throwing away the cards in his hand, Rob asked Madison beside him in a relaxed manner, after the last haunted hotel incident, "Madison, have you received any Hollywood movie offers?" He is no longer the rookie he was in the beginning. After several battles with supernatural beings, he is no longer nervous and anxious. He now has the leisure to think about what he and Madison said when they left the Montelian Hotel. Madison, who gets excited when talking about Hollywood, curled her lips and said, "It really exists." "Oh? Really?" Rob was a little surprised. He didn't expect that a joke he made would come true. Sure enough, this is an era of entertainment to death. "What movie?" he inquired. "Madison, low-budget horror movies. Like you said, after I hooked up with the haunted hotel, the idiots in Hollywood only offered me horror movies." Queenie at the side laughed and said, "I know. It's the kind of movie where the heroine is wearing revealing clothes and screaming while being chased by a killer, full of S*X and violence." Madison curled her lips and rarely refuted. Apparently, Queenie was absolutely right. "But Madison, you're not very suitable. Your breasts are not big enough," Queenie said bluntly. Madison sneered, "Queenie, you are quite suitable, but I don't know if there is any film company that dares to hire you." After that, she turned to Rob without paying any more attention to him and said, "Cordelia and the board of directors will not agree to my taking a few months off to film. Of course, I also looked down on those small movies with an investment of only a few million, so I rejected them all. You can try the Crocodile Man's Big Eagle. Some producers and directors may really need it." Zoe, who had learned some bad things, suddenly suggested. "Good idea." Madison's eyes lit up as she thought of the special tonic wine she was brewing in the room. Rob was silent. He always felt that the thing was a scam. But since Madison was so confident, he didn't bother to attack the other party. Ding dong. Coincidentally, the doorbell rang again at this time. Chapter 49, Resurrection. Trick or treat if you don't give me candy. Familiar laughter sounded, and the already skilled Delphi reluctantly took out the few candies and said, "Don't move, I'll distribute it." Noticing that a young man suddenly appeared behind the group of children, she glared at him unhappily. "There's no place for you." The young man gave a polite smile. "Of course, I mean I'm not here for candy. I live next door and I have something I want to give to Nan here." Indoor. Zoe, who heard the noise, smiled and said to Nan, "Nan, your boyfriend has brought you a gift." "It's not done yet," Nan said with a smile on his face, and quickly got up from the chair and watched the young man run away. "Is this true?" Madison put down the cards in his hand and said in surprise as he looked at the couple talking intimately at the door. Rob glanced at Madison and knew exactly what the other person was trying to say. "There's nothing I can do about it, since I am a person who pursues spiritual feelings. Unlike him, he is a vulgar person who pursues beautiful face, beautiful breasts, and beautiful legs." Not long after, Nan, who had taken over the cookies made by the young man, brought him over and introduced them to the others, except for Zoe, who she had already met before. "I'm Luke, the new neighbor next door. Nice to meet you." The sunny young man Luke introduced himself with a smile. "Queenie." Queenie waved her hand to welcome him. "Madison Montgomery." Madison, who wanted to verify it, just showed a charming smile, and saw Luke pass by her without any reluctance and look at the last person. Her expression froze for a moment. Rob saw this and shook his head in amusement. He greeted Luke, "Rob. Welcome. Nan has mentioned you many times in the past few days. Today we finally meet you in person." "Really?" Luke looked at the somewhat shy Nan with joy, then turned around and said, "Actually, I've wanted to visit you for a long time, but was delayed by some trivial matters at home." Rob smiled and said, "You are welcome to come and play with Nan often." A group of people started to communicate happily. Only Madison seemed a little out of place. She found an opportunity and gritted her teeth in Rob's ear unwillingly. There must be something wrong with him. "This woman," Rob reminded seriously, "don't disturb Luke and Nan's relationship. Also, believe in your own charm." As he spoke, he quietly explored Madison with one hand. Madison's anger turned into joy in an instant. Just as she was about to fight back after throwing Luke away, Rob's brows suddenly tightened. Hearing a lot of chaotic footsteps outside, he patted Madison's hand, stood up, walked to the window, opened the curtains and looked out. Just at this moment, the dark clouds in the sky drifted away, and the bright moonlight shone down, illuminating the hideous and rotten corpses that were slowly approaching the Witch Academy. Dong dong. There was another knock on the door. Delphi opened the door again out of habit. Rob called out to her, "Don't move." Delphi was stunned, and stopped when she saw Rob's face full of solemnity and seriousness. Rob walked quickly to the front of the group, gave Madison a look, and ordered, "Let him sleep." Madison said nothing and looked at Luke. The latter only felt a strong sense of sleepiness rising in his heart. His eyelids fluttered quickly, and he fell on the sofa beside him. Rob, still feeling unsafe, pulled out the Palin dagger he had already equipped, and knocked Luke on the back of his head with the handle of the knife. Only then did he feel completely relieved. It happened so fast. By the time everyone reacted, Luke had already fallen into a deep sleep. Nan hurried over and checked on Luke with an anxious look on his face. Queenie held her head in her hands and said in disbelief, "Shit. Rob, Madison, what are you doing?" Rob quickly explained, "There are enemies outside. If you don't want to expose your identity as a witch, you must knock Luke out." Nan, are you ready to tell Luke your identity yet? Nan, with red eyes, hesitated for a moment and nodded. Then I did the right thing, said Rob. Girls, brace yourselves, another attack on witches is coming. Delphi, you don't need to be a human shield this time. Carry Luke upstairs and hide. Remember to protect our guests. By the way, call Spaulding down. Why is a grown man hiding? Nan, you go up too. Since Cordelia and Fiona were not there, Rob, who acted as half-master, gave quick instructions. Zoe ran to the window to check and shouted, "Zombies! There are a lot of zombies outside that look just like the ones in the TV series." Rob explained, "That's not a zombie, it's a voodoo resurrection corpse. But it's also the inspiration for the former." Seeing this, everyone dared not delay any longer. Delphi and Nan hurriedly took the unconscious Luke upstairs. Rob, Zoe, Madison, and Queenie prepare for battle. Really? You can't even behave yourself even after coming back. Queenie grabbed the dinner knife and said with an unhappy look on her face. She wasn't too worried about the upcoming resurrected corpses. Not only her, but others as well. After all, they had just killed the alligator man and his cult, and their hands were still hot. Madison said excitedly, "It was a really exciting experience. I decided to write these things into a script, and it will definitely be a hit when it is made into a movie. Remember to write me as the male protagonist." Knowing that bullets were useless, Robert came to the door with a knife. "Of course." Madison agreed readily. Zoe continued, "Then I want to be the heroine." Madison immediately shook her head, "Don't even think about it. I'm the heroine." In order to avoid internal unrest before the battle even started, Rob simply opened the gate. Looking at the three daughters of Delphi who had died many years ago standing side by side at the door, Rob greeted them politely. "Hello." With a flash of knife light, three hideous and ugly heads instantly flew into the sky. Plop! 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 Three headless bodies fell down in unison. Stepping over them, Rob, knife in hand, walked toward the courtyard with the young witches. At the same time, Mary, who was far away in the secret room of the hair salon, was floating in the air. She opened her tightly closed eyes, revealing her pale pupils, and said coldly, "Start." In an instant, the resurrected zombies who had previously lowered their heads and looked listless raised their heads in unison, raised the weapons in their hands, and strode forward with roars. Suddenly, an extremely surprised and unexpected voice sounded. "Man, your makeup is so cool. It's amazing." Three typical American to-be youths ran to the group of zombies without fully understanding the current situation, and slapped the zombies with their hands to express their envy and admiration. Rob took one look and knew that these three guys were hopeless. Sure enough, just as Zoe was anxiously trying to remind them, the three young men's faces instantly turned from joy to fear, and they were quickly disemboweled amidst loud screams. Stimulated by the blood, the zombies attacked Rob and the witches even more frantically. Chapter 50, Continuous. The resurrected corpse is a slave puppet created by voodoo using dead people and witchcraft, and it absolutely obeys the orders of its master. The famous zombie culture got its inspiration from the resurrected corpse. However, unlike zombies who move slowly, the reanimated corpses move very quickly under the command of their masters. The zombie that ran to the front had already raised the rusty axe in its hand and chopped at Rob. A cold light flashed for a moment. Rob, who was faster, had already slashed its neck with a sharp knife. The zombie's movements froze for a moment. However, soon, grains of sand like dust suddenly emerged from the place where the deep wound on its neck was made. After quickly healing its wounds, the zombie roared and attacked again. Ordinary injuries are ineffective? In that case, Rob turned the blade, which was much faster than the zombie, and not only did he easily dodge the opponent's axe, but he also stabbed it straight in the next moment. Phew! The blade of the dagger was completely embedded in the zombie's brain, leaving only the handle outside. When Rob pulled out the dagger again, the wounds of the resurrected corpse did not heal. Instead, it fell down with a bang, just like the three sisters who were beheaded at the door before. Rob, who had figured out the weakness of the revenants, did not hesitate any longer. Instead, he advanced with his sword and killed the other revenants. The other side. After stabbing herself several times and finding that the zombie was fine, Queenie noticed Rob's actions and reacted by stabbing herself in the head. Not only that, after several attempts, she also discovered that the heart was also the zombie's weakness. Zoe and Madison did not pick up knives like Rob and Queenie, but instead cast spells in perfect accordance with their identities as witches. Boom! As Zoe watched, raging flames started to burn on the corpse. Looking at the zombies that had been so hideous before and struggling in the flames with screams, Madison paused his best mind control and started a fire as well. Although there were a large number of revenants, with the joint efforts of Rob and three witches, they were quickly defeated one by one without any danger. Seeing the courtyard full of corpses, Rob put away his dagger and called on everyone to clean up the place as soon as possible. Inside the Voodoo Queen's secret room, Mary's body was suspended in the air, her eyes turned completely white, as if she had seen the scene at the witch school. She sneered and ordered, "Continue." As soon as he finished speaking, in the courtyard of the Witch Academy, amidst the shocked expressions of everyone, except for a very few motionless corpses, the resurrected corpses that had fallen down before stood up again at this moment. Not only that, outside the gate, there were more zombies striding towards them carrying various weapons. Shit! What's going on? Queenie, who was about to vomit from being fed, looked at the scene in disbelief. Rob looked at the resurrected corpse beside him whose head had just been chopped off, but which was now connecting and struggling to stand up on its own, and could only sigh that the Voodoo Queen's witchcraft is really not that simple. He kicked the resurrected corpse that had half of its body crawled up and sent it flying. He then looked at the resurrected corpses that were still lying on the ground without any movement. After a quick check, he suddenly had an idea. These resurrected corpses that never woke up had one thing in common. That means the inside of the brain is basically burned out. Although Zoe and Madison burned quite a few resurrected corpses, with simple aiming, most of them were only burned on the torso. It was rare for the flames to burn directly on the head and penetrate deep into the brain. Therefore, these resurrected corpses can be revived again when summoned by Mary. After realizing this, Rob no longer hid his skills, and flames quickly wrapped around the blade. Am I dazzled? Rob, you can actually summon fire. Queenie, who was still in shock at the resurrection of the zombies, opened her mouth wide again when she saw Rob's move. Zoe and Madison are fine. Having spent more time with Rob and having a closer relationship with him, they naturally felt that Rob was unusual, otherwise he would not have been able to defeat the crocodile man alone. Now that the truth has been revealed, there is more understanding and excitement. We are all on the same path, that's good. Rob didn't care that his abilities were exposed, as they were with the witches. The Salem wizard bloodline is not something that only women can inherit, men can too. It doesn't matter even if I'm mistaken for a wizard. Anyway, throughout history, there has only been a supreme witch, and there has never been a supreme wizard. He didn't have to worry about Fiona causing trouble for him. I didn't expose it before, I just kept it to myself out of habit. If you continue to hide at this critical moment, you will be a fool. There was no time to answer Queenie's question. Rob, holding the flaming dagger in his hand, dodged the attack of a revenant with a flash, then raised the dagger, and the blade easily broke the revenant's jaw. The flames on the blade quickly turned into fire snakes that poured into the interior. Plop. After a moment, the corpse shook and fell down, without any movement. Rob's eyes lit up, and he immediately reminded, Aim at the head of the revenant to cast the fire. Zoe and Madison did so. The heads of the resurrected corpses were quickly set on fire, and the pressure on the field was relieved. But soon, under Mary's remote control, the zombies who reacted deliberately put their arms in front of their heads, preferring to have their arms set on fire rather than be hit in the vital parts. Madison frowned, and immediately changed his mind. He first used his mind to move the zombie's arm away, and then ignited the fire. But this consumed a lot of her mana. Seeing Rob standing alone in the front fighting against many revenants, Zoe was anxious and simply snatched a relatively intact longaxe from the fallen revenant's hand, and imitated her boyfriend to play the melee magician. "Rob, let me help you." Just as he killed a zombie that pounced on him, Rob suddenly heard a familiar voice in his ears. He looked back and saw Zoe holding a flaming axe, rushing towards him as if possessed by the god of war, chopping down several resurrected corpses along the way. Zoe looked at the clothes and face in front of her that were covered in dirty blood and rotten flesh, but her expression did not change at all. Rob was stunned. "Is this still my pure and lovely girlfriend?" Zoe didn't think much about it. She felt like she had endless energy because she was able to fight alongside her boyfriend instead of just hiding behind and watching. Even within the body, there is a new force that has been hidden for a long time and is ready to move. Just as she was about to attack again, Rob held her down. "Go back inside first." Rob's face was serious. Compared to the evil spirits, minotaurs, crocodile men, and zombies encountered before, their strength is very average. There are dozens of them in my hands alone. But the problem is that once they come in groups and continuously, it will become the most difficult trouble. An elephant can be killed by ants. I am not an Iron Man and I will get tired after a long time. It's time to rely on the terrain of the house behind to limit the army of zombies. Chapter 51, Wrong Copy. Rob pulled Zoe back. Things were a little different from what he had imagined. "I thought the resurrected corpses were easy to deal with." "Well, it's indeed easy to deal with. But the number was too large, completely beyond his imagination. There aren't so many resurrected corpses in my memory." Madison and Queenie were called up halfway through. They had come out so high-spirited before, but now they were running back in such a mess. The door slammed shut with a bang. Rob looked back and saw Spaulding standing nervously in the room, holding a golf club he had found from somewhere. Nan was also there, holding the phone and speaking to him in a low voice. "I called Fiora and Cordelia, but they didn't answer or call back." Rob was not surprised. Just like American police always show up at the last minute. It is a luxury to want to rely on a supreme witch who is always out of touch with reality. Bang. 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 The army of zombies had already caught up with them, and now they were not only BG on the door, but also knocking on the windows. Fortunately, we learned a lesson from the Minotaur last time. At Rob's suggestion, the windows on the first floor were renovated and not only were tempered glass produced in China installed, but the door was also replaced with a thicker type. The resurrected corpse couldn't come in for a while. Rob was about to lead a group of people upstairs and use the narrow stairs to launch a counterattack. Zoe suddenly stood up, looked at her hands, and said hesitantly, "I think I have a way to deal with the resurrected corpses outside." Rob stopped and looked at Zoe. Knowing Zoe's character, he didn't ask any more questions. He nodded confidently and said, "Then let's give it a try." After saying that, he simply took Zoe to open the door. "Wait. Is this the decision?" Madison asked in surprise. "This is too fast. Can the decision be made in just 1 or 2 sentences?" Rob waved his hand. "Madison, be ready to respond at any time." "Okay." Madison pouted. Although she was a little unhappy about the tacit understanding and trust between the two, she still had to do what she had to do. Arriving at the door and holding the door handle, Rob glanced at Zoe. After getting an affirmative nod from her, he slowly opened the door without hesitation. Roar. The excited roar came first. Then, one after another, pitch-black arms appeared, like zombies coming out of a cage, rushing through the gaps with great madness and desire, not willing to wait a moment to grab Rob and Zoe who were nearby. Zoe, who saw this, raised her hands calmly, pointing her palms at the zombie, and a powerful force burst out from her body. Dust to dust, ashes to ashes, return to your world. Boom. An invisible shockwave instantly erupted from Zoe's palm, sweeping towards all the zombies outside the door. The next second, Rob, who was also affected, seemed to be fine. Plop, plop, plop. Outside the door, the zombies that had been so violent before suddenly became quiet, and then like dominoes, they fell down one after another without any life, which looked very spectacular. At the same time, inside the Queen of Poison's secret room, Mary, who was floating, trembled all over, and fell from the air with a bang, and her back hit the cold floor hard. Chantal, who was waiting nearby, quickly helped her up and asked anxiously and puzzledly, "What's wrong?" Mary coughed heavily a few times, opened her eyes, and said in a bad tone, "In that house, a powerful force interrupted my witchcraft." Chantal quickly asked, "Is it Fiona?" "No. Another white witch. Younger, with endless possibilities." Mary looked unhappy. Not only because his personal efforts yielded no results, but also because there was such an anomaly among the white witches. This is definitely not a good thing for the black and white witches as the conflict between them becomes increasingly intense. Mary thought for a moment and quickly ordered, "Inform Hank that if he still wants to save his life, he doesn't have to kill Cordelia, but he must kill those young white witches in the witch school. Also, gather more voodoo practitioners here. Don't forget Justifa and Cecil. They have been hiding in the suburbs for a long time. It's time for them to move. You know, the real war has begun." Witch school. When Zoe saw all the zombies fall down under her power, she looked at her hands in disbelief. "Not to mention other people. Zoe, you are so amazing. What kind of spell is that?" Queenie, who had just returned from a walk in the courtyard, asked Zoe with shock on her face. Zoe hesitated and said, I don't know. I just had a feeling at the time, I felt I could deal with them, so I took action. This is a powerful talent that belongs only to Zoe." Nan ran over and said with a happy face. After saying that, she turned her head and looked at Madison, who was muttering to herself, "Madison, it's useless for you to envy me. You can't learn it." "I'm envious." "Humph." Madison snorted coldly and quickened her pace away from Nan. Rather than being envious, she was worried about Zoe's speed of progress. "I have always been the most powerful among the young witches, which is why Rob chose me as his partner. Now that she sees Zoe becoming more and more useful, she only feels that her status is declining. How can she not be worried? We must think of other solutions." Madison glanced at Rob. At this time, Rob also looked at Zoe with surprise. He hadn't noticed it before, but he hadn't expected that his cheap girlfriend had such powerful psychic abilities. Yes, psychic. Not only can Zoe detect and communicate with spirits such as ghosts more easily than others, she can also forcibly expel them. She was the one who easily drove away the resurrected corpse. Rob couldn't help but think of how he dealt with the golden-armed evil spirit. "If we take Zoe with us now, I'm afraid there's no need to cast an exorcism spell. I can just raise my hand and send her back to hell." What a powerful ability. Rob felt like he had traveled to the wrong place. Look at the people around her, Madison, who can make the bus spin in the air easily, Queenie, who can stab herself and get away with it, but kills others instead, Zoe, who has psychic abilities and is even more powerful than Myrtle, who came to pick her up, Fiona, who has the most powerful ability, and Cordelia, who inherited her blood and everything. If a fight really breaks out, you have to launch a sneak attack first and kill the enemy with one blow. Otherwise, the only fate that awaits him is to be killed in return. Such a character should appear in the later plots. The correct way for me to travel through time should be to fight against small minions like resurrected zombies and ghosts that can only scare people. Who would have thought that he would be involved in such a difficult dungeon as the Black and White Witch War? Rob looked at the corpses scattered across the courtyard outside, then looked at his own small body and sighed slightly. Chapter 52, The Wrath of the Supreme Witch. No matter how you complain in your heart, you still have to live with reality. Rob waved his hand to Spaulding, then pointed to the courtyard outside and said, "Spaulding, call Delphi down, and go deal with the bodies outside together. Now that it's dark, we must deal with all the bodies outside. Otherwise, if someone saw me the next day, they would think a super killer had appeared here." Spaulding nodded silently. He had done nothing before, and now is the time to demonstrate his value. Afterwards, Rob said hello to the girls and went upstairs to wash up. After bumping into the zombies, he had a foul smell on him. Not just him. Zoe couldn't stand the nausea anymore and followed him upstairs. However, she did not go to her own room, but came to Rob very naturally, and they took a bath together. An hour later, the bathroom door filled with white steam opened. Zoe, wrapped only in a bath towel, looked at Rob with a red face, happiness mixed with a little regret. Rob knew what she regretted. For this purpose, he even privately asked Cordelia, who had rich theories on magic. The latter admitted to him that unless the target is a wizard and the difference in magical power is not too big, he can withstand Zoe's Black Widow price. The so-called magic power, for Rob, refers to spirituality. Therefore, for the sake of one's own happiness, one has to accommodate more supernatural beings. From another perspective, although he fell into a high-difficulty copy, he was able to contain the supernatural faster and improve himself with the help of others. Rob looked at his personal page. Physique, 2.0. Spiritual, 1.0. Abilities, fire control, mind control, health. Compared to the initial situation of 1.1 physique, 0.1 spirituality, and no ability, the improvement is undoubtedly a leap forward. And this took less than a month. It's a pity that we didn't gain anything from fighting tonight. Rob glanced at the motionless pages and the shelter. The Book of Confinement doesn't favor the resurrected. Yes, to put it bluntly, the army of zombies are all unconscious puppets summoned by the Voodoo Queen Mary using her own magic power. If all of this can be accommodated, then I will undoubtedly have grasped a path to wealth. Not to mention catching the Voodoo Queen. As long as I capture a group of voodoo practitioners and let them continuously create zombies for me, I can easily set up shelters. Rob shook his head, came back to his senses and said goodbye to Zoe as she left. Since they couldn't fight with real weapons, it was ultimately torture for the two of them to lie in bed together. Rob. Just as Rob was about to close the door after seeing Zoe off, he heard Nan calling him. "Luke is still here. Rob, help me take him back." Rob slapped his forehead, almost forgetting that there was a sleeping Luke here. He walked into Nan's room, glanced at Luke who was sleeping soundly on the bed, and joked to Nan, "Are you sure you want to take him back? Now is a good time to make it a done deal." When Nan heard this, she was quite tempted, but finally shook her head and said, "Luke and I both prefer to let nature take its course." "All right." That was all Rob said. Without Nan's help, he carried Luke on his shoulders and walked towards the next room. Luke's mother, the controlling woman who was also a religious fanatic, was not there. This is why Luke dared to come and visit at night. With Nan's guidance, Rob placed Luke back in his chambers. After that, I was finally able to have a peaceful sleep. The next day, when Rob and a group of witches were burning the body hidden by Spaulding yesterday in the backyard, Fiona, who had not been seen for a day, finally returned home. She looked very bad, especially after smelling the strong stench in the courtyard. She walked over holding her nose. When she found a pile of corpses on the ground, she frowned and said, "Oh my God! How many people's graves have you dug? Is it necessary to be so solemn for Halloween?" Rob shrugged and replied, "Lady Fiona, none of us are necrophiles. They all walked here on their own." Obviously, Fiona didn't pay attention to the messages on her phone. After listening to Rob's subsequent series of explanations, her face darkened greatly. Mary. In New Orleans, she naturally knew who was capable of summoning such a large number of resurrected zombies. Fiona took a deep breath, looked at the hero of last night, and praised, "Well done, Zoe." Under normal circumstances, she might be surprised by Zoe's strong talent, or even look at her differently. But now, Fiona looked into the distance with murderous eyes and commanded in a stern voice, "The war has begun. I give you 1 day to finish the matter in your hands as soon as possible. Come with me to kill the Voodoo Queen and her gang of B at night." Wait. War? Voodoo Queen? What on earth is going on? Madison asked in confusion. Fiona looked at Madison, then glanced at the other people who were equally confused, and sighed. "You naive little guys, do you think you can rest easy after surviving yesterday's crisis? If you don't want to end up like Cordelia, you must get rid of the people who caused all this trouble." "Cordelia? What happened to her?" Zoe asked in surprise. "Someone threw acid on her face and blinded her eyes," Fiona said angrily. "Although she is an incompetent mother, she is still a mother after all. How could she not be angry when her daughter was disfigured and even blinded right before her eyes? Then I think about the attack on the college last night. She was absolutely certain that the Voodoo Queen had done it all. The other party knew how powerful he was, so he used the injured Cordelia to hold him back, so that he could take advantage of his absence to break into the Witch Academy and kill all the young witches of the session in order to eradicate the roots of the Salem witches. What a cruel heart. Even though she was incompetent as the Supreme Witch, it didn't mean that she didn't care about the witch group at all. Otherwise, she could have killed all the young witches including Zoe, Madison, Nan, and Queenie. Instead of just observing and narrowing the scope to find the next generation of Supreme Witch. Hearing this, Zoe and the others' hearts immediately sank. They asked with sadness, horror, and worry, "How is Cordelia now?" "She is in the hospital now. If you don't want to become like her, or even worse, then raise your murderous hands and explode your anger." The space seemed to freeze at this moment, and tremendous magic power rose from Fiona's body, giving people infinite pressure. For the first time, she officially demonstrated the true power of the Supreme Witch and gave the final order in a cold tone. "Tonight is the final day to resolve the witches' struggle that has lasted for hundreds of years. Everyone must participate. Either we die or they die. If you say it wrong, they will die." Fiona curled the corners of her mouth, revealing an extremely bloodthirsty smile. Chapter 53, This is definitely not the picture a witch should have. Salem Witches vs. Voodoo. Rob was shocked when he saw Fiona announcing the start of war in an irresistible manner. The development of the matter was completely beyond his expectations. "I can't remember anything like this happening before." This caught him off guard. Rob looked at the young witches beside him. They were also looking at each other, obviously not yet recovered from their shock. After a while, Zoe hesitated for a moment, but still raised her hand and questioned, "Is such a big thing decided so quickly? I mean, should we inform the board of directors?" "Yes. If it doesn't work, let the witch group send more people. It may not be enough for just the few of us to deal with the Voodoo Queen and her gang." Madison, who has always been fearless, also agreed cautiously at this time. Fiona said calmly, "I am the Supreme Witch and have the right to decide everything about the witch group. You know, while we are gathering witches, Mary will not be idle either. They like to create humans when they have nothing to do. If we really compare numbers, we will be at a disadvantage. So the sooner the better. They probably don't think our counterattack will be so quick. By catching them by surprise, we can wipe out these guys who have been fighting the witch group for hundreds of years in one fell swoop. Believe in your strength. And believe me, the title of Supreme Witch is not just for show. Fiona looked at her palms and smiled coldly. Finally, she glanced at the young witches and said, "It's decided. You will have time to prepare during the day, and you will officially gather in the evening. If anyone still doesn't want to join, I don't mind clearing the door first." After saying that, when he was about to turn around, Fiona suddenly remembered that there was another person, turned her head again, looked at Rob unexpectedly and said, "I have to say, boy, you gave me a big surprise. Since you have also awakened the power of a wizard, then you will represent the wizard and act with us tonight." "As you wish, Lady Fiona." In order to avoid being expelled early, and also because of concerns about the safety of Zoe and Madison, Rob had no choice but to go with them. "Very good." Fiona nodded in satisfaction. A deep voice suddenly interrupted, "Do you really want to fight them to the death? Can't you sit down and talk it out?" Fiona's eyes flashed coldly, but after seeing the person who spoke, she suddenly realized and retracted them. She shook her head and said with a smile, "Poor Queenie, when Mary wanted to kill the people in this house, she didn't want to let you, a fellow tribesman, go. Come, let's talk about some things in detail." Fiona waved her hand to Queenie, and told Rob and others to deal with the remaining bodies, then took Queenie to the house. What to do? Looking at the two people's receding backs, Zoe, who was still holding the digging shovel in her hand, said blankly, "What else can I do?" Madison spread her hands. "If I don't want to be killed by Fiona, I have to do what she wants." "Fiona is serious," Nan affirmed, somewhat fearfully. Rob looked at the three women and said, "In that case, let's think about how to deal with those voodoo guys. You guys take care of the remaining bodies. I'll go outside and prepare." "What are you preparing for?" "A thing that kills people." Rob drove to the gun store to do some major pre-war shopping. In the lobby on the first floor, Fiona was talking to Queenie and keeping an eye on her to prevent her from tipping off the voodoo cult when the sound of a door opening was heard. She turned her head and saw a man pushing the door open. His face immediately darkened and he asked in a bad tone, "Why are you here?" "I'm here to get some clothes and supplies for Cordelia." Cordelia's husband, Hank, also said with a bad face. "The relationship between this uncle and son-in-law is very bad. Fiona has always believed that Hank is a liar and every word he says is full of lies, but unfortunately Cordelia has never listened. Hank thinks Fiona is not a competent mother and has no right to interfere in his relationship with Cordelia. The two have disliked each other for a long time." Hearing this, Fiona waved her hand in disdain and said, "Take it quickly and get out of here quickly. Don't let me see you here again. Otherwise, you know my ability." Hank naturally knew that his wife and everyone in this room were witches. Faced with Fiona's threat, he rationally said nothing more and quickly went upstairs. Although he usually lives outside, he has come here a few times occasionally and would not mistake the door. When he had packed everything and was about to go downstairs with a box of things, he just heard Fiona and Queenie starting to talk about Mary and voodoo again. He suddenly paused, held his breath, listened for a while, then went downstairs again. Without paying any attention to Fiona, he pushed the door open and walked out. Back in the car, Hank suddenly stepped on the brakes when he was far away from the Witch Academy. He took out his cell phone, paused for a long time at the contact father, and finally pressed it. Late at night. Outside Mary's hair salon in the lower 9th Ward, New Orleans. In the silence, accompanied by the whistling cold wind, a row of mysterious people in black cloaks suddenly appeared. The black hat, black robe, and black clothes, coupled with the mysterious and breathtaking aura emanating from him. At first glance, he looks like a messenger from hell walking on earth. But when you get closer and take a closer look, you can see that except for the leader, the other men in black are holding long and short guns in their hands, which dispels a lot of the weirdness. I've never heard of evil spirits using guns. It's so inconsistent with their image. Madison, with her golden hair sticking out from her hood, didn't care about any of this. She played with the Winchester M1897 in her hand with great interest. Compared with her image, she preferred the sense of security of the cold gun in her hand. Not only her, Zoe also had a shotgun of the same model in her hand. Nan and Queenie held pistols. Nan, who had rarely fired a gun, was holding a Glock 43 pistol suitable for women. Although Queenie was good with guns, due to his own abilities and the influence of the person he was dealing with this time, he just took an ordinary pistol to deal with it. As for Rob, he specially purchased for the girls during the day and prepared for himself an AR-15 rifle which was famous in various shootings. Everything is ready. When dealing with voodoo wizards, no matter how strange their magic is, bullets are always the best solution. Otherwise, the ancestors of these wizards would not have been plundered here by colonists armed with flintlock rifles. At this moment, looking at the fully armed young witches on both sides, although Fiona knew that there was nothing wrong with doing so, as the Supreme Witch, she couldn't help but sigh. This is definitely not the picture of the Salem witches. Chapter 54, What is the Supreme Witch? With a flip of his palm, flames rose up. A glance from his eyes bewitched all living beings. The spell was cast, bringing destruction and despair to the world. This is the image of witches and how they are viewed by the world. Instead of holding hot weapons and looking ready to go like now. In response, Madison just wanted to sneer and say, "My lord, times have changed. The vampires in Hollywood movies have changed from sucking blood everywhere to being well-dressed and opening hospitals and biological research institutes to suck blood in a reasonable way. What's wrong with a witch playing with a gun? This is called keeping up with the times. Fiona, do you need one too?" Madison asked with a smile, seeing that Fiona was the only one with empty hands among the crowd. "No need. You guys should take these small water pipes." "Are you kidding? I am the Supreme Witch. If being pointed at by a few guns can be dangerous, that would be too bad. It's time for you to witness why the Supreme Witch is so powerful." Fiona narrowed her eyes, slowly raised her right hand, spread her 5 fingers, and faced the large second-floor hair salon in front of her. Seeing this, Zoe asked worriedly, "If the noise gets too loud, what if someone outside finds out? I have cast an isolation spell here. No outsiders will disturb us before dawn," Fiona said, with everything under control. "Ready." As soon as she finished speaking, Fiona clenched her 5 fingers towards the hair salon and suddenly clenched her fist. An extremely terrifying aura burst out from her. Boom. Moment. The sky is shaking and the earth is moving. As Rob and the other young witches stared in amazement, they saw a magnitude 10 earthquake occur in front of them. In just a moment, dozens of houses around the hair salon collapsed. As a force that has been entrenched here for more than 200 years, there are naturally voodoo cultists around Mary's residence, whether for safety or concealment. Under Fiona's hand, countless people lost their lives without knowing why. The once neat community was reduced to ruins. Under the residual power, thick smoke and dust turned into rolling waves and rushed over. Fiona waved her hand and easily blew away the smoke and dust, then lit a cigarette for herself with a satisfied look on her face. Under the influence of the wind, the rich scent of vanilla rushed into Rob's nose, but he didn't bother to cover it up. Looking at the devastating scene before his eyes, he was extremely shocked, but also felt fortunate. Fortunately, she was not arrogant enough to confront Fiona head-on, and had always let the young witches avoid her. Otherwise, regardless of his current small body, Even if he were 10 times stronger, he would still be no match for Fiona. Is everything resolved? At this time, Queenie, who was staring at everything in front of him, said with mixed feelings. Mary won't die so easily. Besides, there are still some small fry out there. Fiona finished speaking, took a puff of her cigarette, and just as she was about to exhale, a series of intense gunshots rang out. It was not Rob and his men who fired the shots, but the black people who had managed to escape the disaster in the ruins who raised their guns and fired towards her in anger. Rob was about to shout to Zoe and the others to find cover. Fiona gave a reassuring gesture. The next second, a huge invisible force of thought swept through the air. All the flying bullets instantly froze in mid-air. Then Fiona stretched out her hand and pointed, and all the bullets flew back at a faster speed. Ah ah ah! Accompanied by screams, clouds of blood mist exploded, and no more gunshots were heard. Rob finally understood why Fiona looked down on guns. Can your mind do this? He turned and asked Madison beside him. Madison, whose eyes were sparkling, also saw the same scene, hesitated and shook her head. She had never tried it, but she knew without thinking that she could not do it as easily as Fiona. The gap is too big. This is normal. After all, one has been in the position of Supreme Witch for decades, and the other has just awakened her witch power not long ago. White Witch. The Voodoo Queen won't let you go. Suddenly, an old voice sounded from the ruins. An old black witch wearing a skull necklace crawled out, and with a face full of gloom and hatred, she threw the necklace to the ground. Using the necklace as a medium, she cursed in the most vicious voice, I curse you. From now on, you will not see the light. You will fall into the abyss and be with the devil. Noisy. Fiona looked at the old witch coldly. The next second, the old witch's voice stopped abruptly. With a look of horror on her face, she kept searching her mouth with both hands, only for her mouth to disappear for no apparent reason, leaving only a smooth surface. Rob, who had just regained his vision and escaped from the old witch's curse, saw this scene and couldn't help but think of the guy with a fork on his head whose mouth disappeared under the gaze of a certain witch. The difference is that now not only the old witch's mouth disappeared, but her nose, eyes, and ears also disappeared one by one, and in the end she suffocated to death in extreme pain. Ebony. Damn it! Voodoo Queen Mary, who had just escaped from the rubble, witnessed the death of people around her and looked at the culprit with extreme anger. Fiona! How dare you? Are you trying to start an all-out war between Voodoo and the witches of Salem? Hasn't it already started? Everything was doomed after you decided to summon the army of revenants to attack the Witch Academy and disfigure Cordelia. The revenant appeared only to take Delphi away. As for Cordelia being disfigured, I didn't do it. Fiona said with disdain, it's done. That's the limit of the Voodoo Queen. I'm not like the previous Supreme Witch. She only sought peace in a weak way. I, on the other hand, have decided to eliminate all dangers that affect peace. Mary's face darkened, arrogant idiot. Since you want to die, I don't mind having another White Witch's body in the secret room. Especially the body of the Supreme Witch. She never regretted what she had done to the White Witches. But she didn't expect Fiona to come so quickly this time. She didn't even have time to gather people and was caught off guard. Watching her tribesmen crawling out of the ruins in a panic, with many still buried forever beneath the ruins, Mary glanced coldly at Fiona and her group with murderous eyes, then suddenly opened her mouth and let out a long, sharp howl. Hiss hiss. In an instant, pythons with thick thighs swarmed out from all directions, spitting out long and thin tongues. At Mary's command, they crawled rapidly towards Fiona and her group who were reflected in the cold vertical pupils. Seeing that the witch war turned into a python disaster, Rob didn't wait any longer and directly raised his AR-15 and started shooting. Chapter 55 Voodoo. Da da da. Da da da. Following Rob's first firing, Zoe, Madison, Nan, and Queenie, who had guns, also opened fire. The dense bullets instantly turned into a storm, turning the pythons in the front upside down. In an instant, the snake's head exploded, the snake's body broke into multiple pieces, and snake blood splattered everywhere. The python, which had been so majestic before, suffered heavy casualties all of a sudden. Mary, who saw this, was not disappointed at all. Suddenly she started humming a strange song. Under the influence of the song, the snake blood scattered all over the ground seemed to come alive, rising up drop by drop to form bloody snake shadows one after another. As the song reached its climax, all the blood-colored snake shadows roared silently, and then turned into blood lines, rushing towards Rob and others from the air at an even faster speed. Blood witchcraft. Fiona gave a mocking smile but did not choose to attack. Instead, she looked at the young witches. After discovering that bullets had no effect on these blood shadows, Rob reminded them in time, use fire. Madison and Zoe, who had already learned the art of controlling fire, immediately put down their guns upon hearing this. As they looked around, they saw balls of fire igniting from the blood shadow, burning it to ashes in an instant. Rob, whose magic power was not as strong as theirs, followed the principle of sustainability. He wrapped the flames around the knife again, transformed himself into a melee mage, and cut the blood shadows with the knife. Never let the blood shadow get close to you. This was the conclusion Rob came to after he had just killed a blood shadow and was suddenly attacked by another blood shadow lurking nearby. With his extraordinary reaction, he dodged the attack and even killed the second blood shadow, but the blood shadow just narrowly missed him. Rob looked at his left arm that had been touched. There was a small piece on it that was like dead wood and completely lifeless. If I let the blood shadow cover my whole body. It's chilling to think about it. Really vicious witchcraft. In the following time, Rob became more careful. Fiona turned her eyes away from Rob. Although she admired his performance, she knew that the wizard's achievements were limited, so she didn't pay too much attention to him. She turned to Madison and Zoe, who were releasing flames, Zoe to be exact. As for Madison, after their last conversation during their outing, she no longer cared about him. Has it grown to this point in such a short period of time? Fiona thought thoughtfully. Finally she looked at Queenie and Nan. The two who had not awakened the ability to blaze stood anxiously in the back, yet at the same time they strongly desired to possess the same power so that they could help their companions. Queenie succeeded. In just 1 minute, stimulated by the continuous release of flames by Madison, Zoe, and even Rob, she also awakened the ability to control fire and quickly join the battle. The witches of this session are very talented, Fiona said with emotion. In the class she was in back then, apart from herself, the only one with decent ability was Myrtle, a current member of the board of directors. However, among the current witches, Zoe, who had just awakened her magical powers, was able to surpass her. Others like Madison, Queenie, and Nan also have their own strengths. It's so hard to find. Fiona shook her head. Seeing that the blood shadows were almost destroyed, she snapped her fingers, burning the remaining blood shadows in an instant, then stepped forward in her high heels, took the initiative to walk towards Mary, and said sarcastically, "Is this your method? Meeting in person is not as good as hearing about her. It seems that over time, the power of the famous voodoo queen is gradually fading. I suggest you surrender. Otherwise I might accidentally hurt you." Hearing this, Mary snorted coldly and said, "I can smell the stench from a long distance away. How can a dying supreme witch say this? What I just said was just an appetizer. Next, I will treat you well." Mary waved her hand. Boom. 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 The remaining voodoo practitioners beat their tambourines vigorously. Soon, a large number of resurrected corpses, including those of the believers who had just died, struggled out of the ruins and rushed towards Fiona ferociously. Fiona's eyes flashed with disdain, and balls of flames burned on the corpse. "If you..." Before she finished speaking, she suddenly paused, only to find that most of the zombies that were eroded by the flames did not fall down, but continued to pounce on her. Fiona quickly responded, "It's really a big investment to nurture a resurrected corpse for such a long time. For voodoo practitioners, although the resurrected corpses can fight against enemies, most of the time they serve as their assistants and slaves. Generally speaking, if a resurrected corpse has existed for decades and is constantly nurtured by voodoo practitioners, its body will be much stronger than a resurrected corpse that is summoned at will, and it may even have a hint of spirituality. This is also the reason why they are currently very resistant to Fiona's fire. It will probably be very painful for you to destroy them all. It takes most voodoo practitioners decades to cultivate such a powerful revenant. What appears here is probably the entire essence of voodoo." Fiona smiled at the thought. Just as the zombie's hands were about to touch her, she disappeared in an instant. The phantom migration of the 7 formations. Fiona appeared beside Zoe, patted her on the shoulder and said, "I'll leave these guys to you." Zoe nodded solemnly. Carefully recalling everything that happened last night, she raised her hands and faced forward. A huge and invisible magical power surged out and swept towards the resurrected zombies. Next second. Just like last night, even though the resurrected corpses here were more powerful, they still fell down one after another like dumplings, without a sound. The voodoo practitioners' faces changed drastically in an instant. Mary looked at Zoe in surprise. "It was you last night. What a powerful magic power." Soon, her eyes turned fierce again. "It is very likely that you will be the next Supreme Witch." "Very good, then let's catch both generations of Supreme Witches here." Mary held up a snakeskin kettle filled with blood from the python. Most of the blood had flowed silently into this place instead of turning into blood. At this moment, as Mary took a deep breath, all the fallen corpses collapsed and turned into wisps of black gas that merged into the kettle filled with snake blood. How come she didn't learn a lesson from last night's failure? The reason why he released the resurrected corpse now was because he had the idea that it didn't matter whether it was effective or not, as he would use it for his own benefit anyway. "It's time." Mary, who had been preparing for a long time, looked at the black and red mixed in the pot and drank it in one gulp. Fiona noticed the scene and her face changed for the first time, and she immediately stepped forward to stop it. However, a magical power that was not much inferior suddenly attacked. It's too late. Fiona is stopped by Chantal, Mary's sister and future successor to the title of Voodoo Queen. Chapter 56, Flesh and Blood Labyrinth. It's too late. Chantal stops Fiona. Seeing that the situation was not good, Rob didn't care about anything else, raised his AR-15, and fired a burst of bullets at Mary. A thick, cracked slab of stone rose from the ruins, blocking all the bullets. After doing all this, Mary looked coldly at Rob, who had shot her in the back, and without further delay, she drank the black and red blood in one gulp. In a flash, Mary's belly swelled as if she was pregnant for 10 months. The blood vessels in her body were wriggling like snakes, her eyes were already pitch black, and her mouth was wide open. Woo woo woo. Along with the howling wind and the roar of evil spirits, a large amount of black and red mist rushed out from Mary's mouth, which seemed like a bottomless pit. Before Rob and the others could react, the strange fog that covered the sky and the sun rolled in like a raging wave, submerging them all in an instant. "Now, the roles of hunter and prey have been reversed," Mary announced with a sneer. "Go. Kill them." "Yes." The surviving voodoo cultists walked murderously into the thick fog. Everything happened so fast. When the strange black and red fog swept in, Rob, who had no time to join up with the others, subconsciously held his breath, fearing that the gas was poisonous. It wasn't long before his face was filled with astonishment. In just the blink of an eye, the surrounding black and red mist disappeared. Instead, there is a maze-like place made of flesh and blood and composed of countless towering walls. What the hell is this? Rob thought he was hallucinating and pinched himself subconsciously. It hurts a lot. It didn't feel like a hallucination, nor was it a dream. He reached out and touched the wall of flesh again. Very real and very disgusting. Rob withdrew his hand and was about to explore the way ahead. The silent wall of flesh and blood suddenly cracked into dozens of holes, and dozens of black arms quickly stretched out from inside, grabbed him, and dragged him into the wall. Shit. Rob was caught off guard and fell towards the wall of flesh and blood. He saw a huge crack on the wall of flesh and blood being torn open from top to bottom as the huge waves rolled, just waiting to eat him up. At the critical moment, he quickly drew out his dagger and swung it with all his strength, cutting off dozens of black arms. The pulling force weakened, and Robert, who had regained his balance, did not dare to be careless. With the blade flashing continuously, he finally cut off all the arms. But this is just the beginning. After the severed arm timidly retreated into the gap, a new black arm covered with disgusting mucus and flesh and blood residue stretched out as the wall of flesh and blood continued to wriggle, determined to merge Rob, the living man, with itself and the others. Snap! He wasn't paying attention for a moment, and the AR-15 he had just bought hanging on his chest was torn apart. Rob had no time to feel distressed. Seeing that the black arm had no end in sight, he didn't dare to stay any longer. He took a big step back, and while moving away from the wall of flesh and blood, he ran in the other direction. Just at this moment, the palace of flesh and blood composed of countless walls seemed to wake up. No matter where Rob ran, the squirming walls of flesh and blood around him would stretch out arms and keep grabbing at him. Rob could only use his pistol and dagger to clear the way and ran wildly without stopping. What the hell is this place? A maze. The pistol bullets were soon used up, and Rob, who could only swing the dagger, frowned. He didn't know how Mary did it. Judging from the distance he just ran, even if he took more detours, he should have run out of the area where Mary's hair salon was located in reality. But the reality is that there is a seemingly endless corridor made of flesh and blood before our eyes. What made him even more worried was that as time went by, the walls on both sides were moving closer to the center at a speed visible to the naked eye. This means that if you don't want to become a sandwich, you must find an exit as soon as possible. Rob picked up speed. Just as he turned a corner and cut off the arm in front of him with a knife, and then dodged the arm attacking from the side, an obscure voice suddenly sounded in his ears. In an instant, Rob felt as if he had fallen into water, and every step he took was extremely difficult. His speed slowed down involuntarily. Seeing this, the arms on the surrounding walls quickly stretched out excitedly and grabbed him easily. After just a few breaths, countless pairs of black hands almost covered his entire body. Rob was about to be dragged into the wall of flesh and blood, unable to struggle no matter how hard he tried. A black man with bird feathers on his head and red tattoos all over his face walked out. The reason Rob's speed suddenly slowed down just now was because he cast the slowness curse. Looking at the desperate prey, he made a throat-slitting gesture and spoke a lot of slang that outsiders couldn't understand in a good mood. Voodoo and the Salem witches have a deep blood feud. It would definitely be a happy thing for him if he could kill one of them. Boom. An accident happened. A ball of crimson flame suddenly rose from Rob's right arm. Compared to bullets and blades, flames were obviously more frightening to the black arms. As part of his arm was burned black by the flames and collapsed at the touch, and as the remaining arm shrank back in fear, Rob released his right hand holding the dagger. No nonsense. There was a sudden flash of silver light. Rob threw the dagger with all his strength, and with a sharp sound of friction through the air, the dagger flew towards the black man at an extremely fast speed. The black man, who was very excited just now, suddenly changed his expression. He tried to dodge, but the dagger came too fast. He could only watch as it pierced deeply into his chest. Blood was flying everywhere. The black man stared at all this in a daze, and stretched out his hand to grab the dagger on his body, but halfway through, his arm collapsed weakly. Thump! The lifeless black man fell heavily to the ground. Rob, who had finished cleaning his arms, came over, took back the dagger, looked at the black man's body and said, "Idiot, don't you know that most villains die from the last-minute nonsense?" The moment Rob felt his speed involuntarily slowing down, he knew he had encountered a new enemy. However, he did not notice the other party's whereabouts at that time, and was threatened by the flesh and blood wall around him, so he deliberately let the black arm grab him. If the other party never shows up, the worst that can happen is that he turns into a fireman and tries to break free. If the opponent appears, just like what happened just now, I would take advantage of his complacency and kill him with one blow. Now it seems that this guy is quite easy to fool. Noticing that a new page had been added to the shelter book, Rob, who was in a very urgent situation at the moment, did not take a closer look. After taking a quick glance and realizing that the black man's abilities would not play any significant role at the moment, he did not hesitate to directly put the 60 shelter points he had just harvested into spirituality. The previous continuous consumption had almost exhausted his already limited spiritual energy. Knowing that the black arms and even the wall of flesh and blood were afraid of fire, he naturally knew what to choose. Spiritual, 1.0 spiritual, 1.6. Feeling the spiritual energy in his body increase a lot, Rob let out a breath. Chapter 57 The Situation of the Witches. After finishing his own business, Rob looked at the black man's body again. After Mary used strange means to drag herself and others into this maze of flesh and blood, these voodoo followers were obviously sent by her to deal with her and others. As the home team, these people must enjoy some convenience. Rob wasn't sure whether the black man found himself with accurate information or just stumbled upon it blindly. But he was sure of one thing, that when the black people appeared here, they were not attacked by the wall of flesh and blood. Thinking of this, Rob tried to lift the black man's body and drag it to the wall of flesh and blood. The latter didn't react at all, but instead kept showing a special liking to him who was further behind. Some kind of identification. Rob swung his knife to cut off the black claws that had grabbed him, and was about to put down the black man's body. Suddenly, the wall of flesh and blood in front of him shook violently. As Rob looked on in amazement, he saw a passage crack open in the middle of the wall of flesh and blood in front of him. It's not the kind that eats people, but a passage that leads directly to the space behind the wall. What is this? Labyrinth administrator privileges. Rob's brows lightened. With the black man's corpse, he no longer had to run around in the maze like a headless fly. You can even go all the way to the end and exit the maze. It seems that Mary is still outside the maze, so it's better not to go out for the time being. Rob glanced around and also noticed the space where the black man's body was, and the reality that the walls of flesh and blood were no longer pressing inwards. So, without the previous worries, he decided to find Zoe, Madison, and others first. I don't know how they are doing. I hope everything is okay. At the same time, somewhere in the maze, a dozen walls away from Rob, raging fires were burning all around. Zoe sat in the middle, holding her shotgun, resting tiredly. She didn't encounter any voodoo cult members, but the black arms that kept extending out from everywhere took away a lot of her energy. Without Rob's physique, she could only temporarily stop looking for Rob and others and use the power of fire to recover her strength as soon as possible. The other side. A fierce battle was going on in a corner of the maze. Thoughts, flames, mind control. Madison used his skills one by one with great arrogance, and soon killed a voodoo witch he met. Humph! You overestimate your own abilities. Madison, who was experienced in combat, glanced at the witch's body lying on the ground with disdain. Then she held her head high, stepped over the body of her defeated opponent without even bothering to check it, and continued along her original route. Rob would be speechless if he were here. Unlike Zoe and Madison, who are barely in a good situation, Queenie, who was unwilling to kill, met a powerful witch from voodoo and was captured. If the voodoo queen hadn't told me to spare your life, I would have killed you, the traitor, right now. The black witch, with blood-red curse marks all over her face, spat at Queenie coldly. Queenie trembled her lips, wanting to speak but not knowing what to say, so she could only sigh and lower her head. Among the 4 young witches, Nan is the weakest in combat. Although her mind-reading ability can hear the thoughts within a certain range, she can also avoid being hunted by voodoo cultists in advance. But the problem was that she also heard extremely loud screams from the wall of flesh and blood and from the countless pairs of arms, which kept lingering in her mind like an overwhelming tidal wave. Nan, who felt like he was about to explode, ignored everything else, covered his ears with his hands, and ran towards the direction where the sound was the smallest in great pain. Finally she reached the destination, but was also swallowed up by the wall of flesh and blood. Fortunately, wrapped in flesh and blood, she was able to hear less noisy sounds. Although the final outcome is to be digested by flesh and blood. But the digestion speed of this place that she came to specially was slower than that of other places. Everything depends on time. In addition to Rob and the 4 witches, Fiona was also enveloped by the strange fog. At this time, Fiona was not in the maze of flesh and blood, but was still standing in front of the ruins that she had destroyed herself. There will be no this inserted audio clip if you buy the software license key or activation key. The thick fog from before was no longer there, and Chantal, who had stopped her, had fainted. Now it's just you and me. Fiona looked at Mary calmly. You don't seem worried. Mary looked Fiona up and down. Seeing that she looked calm, she asked in confusion, the young blood of the Salem witches was thrown into the flesh and blood alien space by me, and they are being hunted down. Seeing that this generation is about to be broken, aren't you worried at all? Oh, I understand. Without waiting for Fiona to answer, Mary immediately thought of something and said to Fiona jokingly, although I know that you are selfish, I didn't expect you to be so cruel. You are about to die, otherwise you wouldn't have come to me to ask about your immortality. Mary laughed and said, I have dealt with many supreme witches and I know what your heritage is like. You want to use my hand to help you eliminate those potential candidates for the supreme witch. You are worthy of it, Fiona. Fiona's eyelids sank, and she said coldly, you think too much. If you have this time, you might as well think about how you will die. Mary didn't care at all, you want me to die. There's not much time left. Why don't you wait a little longer? Those young witches will be dead soon. By the way, do you want to know the reason why I live forever? Now I can tell you. In an instant, Fiona's mind trembled violently, and she dropped her hand that was about to be raised, and asked with burning eyes, what's the reason? Mary looked at Fiona's lowered arms and a smile spread across her face. Fiona knew what she was laughing at. But compared to immortality, none of this matters. As long as I get what I want, everything that happened tonight can be covered up and will never be known to outsiders. Fiona hid the murderous intent in her eyes and asked again, what's the reason? The voodoo queen wouldn't be someone who goes back on her word, would she? Of course I'm not you. Mary snorted, but answered straightforwardly, the reason why I can live forever is because I signed a contract with a great being. He gave me eternal life, and I. And you what? Fiona asked urgently. It's just a matter of paying something every year. Mary's voice became a little low when she said this. Fiona paid no attention to this. Finally seeing the dawn of immortality, she said with a fiery look in her eyes, great being? God. or devil. Never mind, none of these are important, as long as I can be immortal. Tell me, his name. His name is. Hurry up and tell me. Call. Ha ha ha. Fiona, do you think I will really tell you his name? Let my mortal enemy also achieve immortality from now on. Mary laughed sarcastically. No. I will let you see hope but never touch it. This is the best revenge for a dying old woman like you who is arrogant and has the blood of many voodoo believers on your hands. Chapter 58 The Unlucky Guy. Mary's laughter was particularly piercing to Fiona's ears. Once you fall into my hands, I will torture you and make you tell me every word. Fiona said, gritting her teeth. She finally took action. Boom. A violent muffled thunder sounded. It was as if the sky and earth changed color. As Fiona stretched out her hand and pointed, the huge power of her thoughts turned into a tangible object and rushed towards Mary like an overwhelming force. Don't you know that all the abilities you have are learned from us? Mary stretched out her hand disdainfully, and the same surging power of thought shot out. Along with a feeling of spatial distortion, the two thoughts collided, causing violent friction and vibration. Buzz buzz buzz. The screams like the chirping of thousands of birds continued to ring out. The earth, which was already suffering, was now rapidly cracking in all directions like a spider web, with the point where the thoughts collided as the center. Seeing the crack spreading to the soles of her feet, Fiona tapped her high heels, and the raging flames turned into an extremely majestic fire dragon, flying towards Mary along the crack in the earth. At the same time, she casually replied, "The origin of mankind is still in Africa. But so what? It does not change your fate of being enslaved by the colonizers." The flames came so quickly that Mary had no time to respond. Her expression changed slightly and she grabbed a substitute doll from her waist. With a strange childlike cry, Mary disappeared, and was replaced by an enlarged substitute doll covered in flames. Got you. Fiona, who used her ability of prophecy and divination to discover Mary's location in advance, smiled coldly, and with a wave of her hand, all kinds of broken wood, bricks, furniture, etc. rushed towards Mary, who had just appeared as if returning to their nests, tightly binding her entire body. Fiona strode towards him, raised her chin, and said proudly, "The so-called voodoo queen is just like this. It seems that hundreds of years of immortality have not only failed to increase your magic power, but weakened it a lot. Is this the price you have to pay? This is a necessity, not a price." Mary, who was unable to move, did not seem panicked at all. "Besides, even if I am not at my peak, I will never be defeated by a supreme witch like you who is about to die and is extremely weak." After that, an ancient and strange sacrificial song came out of her mouth. Fiona's face changed, and when she was about to raise her hand, she suddenly felt a flash in front of her eyes, as if countless men and women wearing grass skirts and animal skin shawls, ancient, barbaric, and mysterious, surrounded her, holding bone knives, braziers, or entangled with poisonous snakes, dancing and singing weird songs that made people feel creepy. These people were getting closer and closer, and one could even clearly see the pale witch marks on their faces. Just as they raised the various sacrificial instruments in their hands and rushed forward, ready to sacrifice themselves, Fiona's eyes changed instantly, as calm as an ice lake, without a trace of ripples. All illusions disappeared. Fiona broke the illusion and returned to reality. At this moment, Mary just broke free from her restraints and said with a smile on her face, "Round 2 begins." The other side. Rob, who had no idea that a peak supernatural battle was taking place in reality, was carrying the black man's corpse and moving through the wall of flesh and blood. He found traces of burning in the place he passed by last time. This made his eyes light up and he quickened his pace of exploration. Another wall was broken in the middle as usual. Rob brought the black man's body to the front and walked in skillfully, but suddenly a stranger appeared in front of him. What a coincidence, the other party also took the same passage, but in the opposite route. The stranger is a black witch. When she first saw the face of the black corpse, she was subconsciously stunned for a moment. Rob didn't hesitate, but without saying a word, he raised his knife and greeted the other party. Ah! The black witch, who hadn't reacted yet, immediately let out a shrill scream. Without waiting for the other party to make a second sound, Rob slashed again. Unlike the previous subconscious knife, this time with precise aim, the black witch's head, who was only concerned with screaming in pain, was directly cut in half. From beginning to end, the black witch didn't even have the strength to resist, and was hacked to death in such a miserable way. Only the 80 newly recorded asylum points in the asylum book indicate the value of this black witch during her lifetime. Thank you. Rob, who solved the supernatural being so easily for the first time, happily waved his hand to thank the black witch's head who died with her eyes open. Then, he put 40 containment points into spirituality, allowing it to reach the first stage limit of 2.0, and then saved the remaining 40 points. If the physical fitness reaches 2.0, the awakening health ability will be the same. When Rob's spirituality reached 2.0, he also awakened an ability called clairvoyance. Spiritual perception allows you to discover abnormal phenomena that are difficult for ordinary people to detect. Very suitable for catching ghosts. Rob opened his spiritual vision as he thought this, and saw that there seemed to be a vengeful spirit crying quietly inside the wall that was originally covered with flesh and blood. Sudden. The vengeful spirit raised its head and gave him a ferocious smile. Rob was startled. In the blink of an eye, when I looked again, I found that the vengeful spirit had disappeared, as if it had never existed at all. Strangeness. Rob muttered something, looked around, and when he found nothing, he looked up into the sky. The wall of flesh and blood was only 3 meters high, and above that was the strange black and red fog that had been seen before. Rob had tried to climb up and explore the strange fog before. But when he reached the end of the wall, the strong sense of crisis that suddenly emerged in his heart made him give up the idea of going deeper into the strange fog. He only has one life, and he would not insist on doing so even though he has been warned. Now that his spiritual vision had been activated, Rob looked again and found something different. The dark and red mist faded away, replaced by rivers of blood and a hellish, dark ghostly aura surrounding it. Looking deeper, there is utter nothingness. Occasionally, a silver-white ripple that was so dangerous and frightening to watch from afar would break through the space and appear in the void. Rob had never seen anything like it. After closing his spiritual vision, which had consumed a lot of his spiritual energy in just a few breaths and making his eyes very tired, he began to think boldly. I thought the real world would be behind the strange fog, but I didn't expect it to be like this. As for the maze of flesh and blood before him, he was certain that it was extremely real and definitely not an illusion or a dream. After all, the 2 new pages added to the Book of Confinement can serve as evidence. When he thought about the strange fog that enveloped him, he found himself in this strange place. It is very likely that the strange fog released by Mary has some specific teleportation function. So, I was teleported to some alien dimension? After already knowing that the so-called hell really exists, although it does not have the power of reincarnation and judgment, it is indeed the place where evil spirits and ghosts live. Rob wouldn't be too surprised by this. However, one cannot help but sigh at the generosity of voodoo, as this place is clearly under their control. Sure enough, a sect that has been passed down for thousands of years has its own particularities. But what about the Vatican? As the largest religion, how come holy water and the cross are useless? To this day, Rob still remembers the scene where the evil spirit Heather slapped the Bible and the cross in his hands away. Chapter 59 Voodoo Doll. After realizing his current situation, Rob continued to move forward with a slight resentment towards the church. I wonder how many voodoo practitioners have come in here. Not long after, when passing a corner, Rob met another voodoo witch. The body of the black man that had performed a great service last time, which he had deliberately brought before him, was of no use this time. Compared to the young and immature black witch who died tragically at the hands of his own knife, the old witch in front of him was undoubtedly much more experienced. The first thing she did was to roll over without caring about her image or even breaking her back, and quickly disappear from Rob's sight. Rob frowned, threw away the black man's body in his hand, grasped the dagger in his right hand, and ran after him. Phew! Without any warning, a bloody hole suddenly appeared on Rob's right arm, and blood spurted out. Feeling the pain, his hand loosened and the dagger fell to the ground. "What's going on?" Rob's expression suddenly changed. "I clearly didn't see any attack, so how could I suddenly get injured? Is that old witch doing something bad?" Rob thought this in his mind and didn't even bother to pick up the dagger, turning the corner as fast as he could. Then he saw the old witch not far away holding a straw doll in her skinny paw and a silver needle inserted in her right arm. Seeing Rob appear in front of her with empty hands, the old witch laughed strangely a few times, and with her other hand put a bottle of creepy-looking dark green potion to her mouth and drank it in one gulp. After trembling all over like an epileptic for a moment, she was no longer old and frail, and her figure appeared in all directions quickly like a ghost. Being experienced, she didn't give Rob a chance to lock eyes with her. Not only that, she took out another silver needle and stabbed it hard into the straw doll's right leg. Phew! At the same time, a stream of blood spurted out from Rob's right leg. Voodoo doll. Rob watched all this with a slightly changed expression. How could he not know the power of this ability when he had a human-shaped voodoo doll by his side? But compared to Queenie, who would cut her own neck when she disagreed with something, this old woman was very hesitant, or her ability was limited. As the thought flashed through his mind, Rob's thigh muscles tensed up, and he instantly controlled his injuries, approaching the old witch without slowing down at all. After the system transformation, not only is his physique strong, but he also controls every part of his body. The wounds caused by the voodoo doll's backlash would be very serious for ordinary people, but for him, they would not be a big deal in the short term. Seeing Rob rushing towards her at no slower speed, the old witch's expression suddenly changed, a fierce look flashed in her eyes, and she took out the silver needle again, about to insert it directly into the voodoo doll's head. An invisible force blocked the silver needle. The old witch knew that this was a resistance from the person being treated. Let's not talk about the fact that Queenie's voodoo doll abilities are too unique. Normally, when using a voodoo doll to curse someone, unless the disparity between the two parties is extremely large, the silver needle can directly pierce into the head and kill the person in one blow. At other times, the patient's vital points are mostly pierced after the accumulated strength of other parts of the body is exhausted to a certain extent. Unexpectedly, after 2 injections, the old witch still couldn't make the final blow. She could only reluctantly point the silver needle at the voodoo doll's left leg and stab it. There was a sudden dull look in her eyes, and the hand holding the silver needle paused. Rob's voice followed, "It can happen once, twice, but not 3 times." The old witch's eyes quickly cleared. Her expression changed as she reacted. Boom! A ball of fire suddenly ignited from the voodoo doll and turned it into ashes in an instant. The old witch had no time to feel sorry and ran away. But it was too late. Taking advantage of the time when the old witch wanted to kill him with one blow but failed and had to continue to attack in order, Rob finally captured her position. Without saying a word, he first used mind control to pin her down, and then summoned fire to destroy the voodoo doll that posed a great threat to him. There was only one old woman who had taken stimulants left, so it was easy to deal with her. Snap! Accompanied by the sound of a cervical vertebra breaking. The old witch's neck was broken by Rob, who caught up with her, and she became a new page in the book of Shelter. Shelter point +120. Rob was in a good mood as he saw that there were many more shelters for black men and young witches than before. Let's put aside the other things. In a short period of time, 3 wizards were killed, and 1 month of interval time and more than 200 shelter points were gained. This was definitely a blessing for him. Under normal circumstances, how could I encounter so many lone wizards? What's more, voodoo wizards actually prefer to hide in dark corners, use poisonous snakes, roosters, ropes, statues, etc., and perform weird dances and chants to curse and kill enemies, rather than forcing them with bare chests like now. It was their leader, Voodoo Queen Mary, who caused all this. Speaking of which, Rob should thank the other party. In such a complex and narrow maze environment, sometimes magic is not as useful as a knife. Next, I will seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and become a wizard hunter. Rob's eyes were filled with an extremely sharp edge. He looked at the Book of Containment, and after finding that there was no ability that could have an immediate effect on him, he put all his containment points into physical and spiritual. A lion needs to use all its strength to fight a rabbit. In this kind of maze environment, killing the enemy quickly and at close range is undoubtedly the best option. Physique, 2.0 Physique, 2.6. Spiritual, 2.0 Spiritual, 2.2. After the attribute value reaches 2.0, every increase of 0.1 will consume 20 containment points. Including those that were retained before, there were a total of 160 shelter points, most of which Rob allocated to physical strength. Feeling the new strength being born in his body that was becoming more and more perfect with the addition of the system, Rob clenched his fists excitedly. Not only that, the voodoo curse wound he had just received also began to heal during his current physical evolution, and soon it would no longer affect his movements. I didn't expect that adding points to physical strength would also have a healing effect. Rob did not gain abilities such as regeneration or rapid healing. Although his recovery speed is faster than that of ordinary people, it is definitely not this fast. Obviously it's the added credit. It seems that we need to reserve some shelters in the future, so that if someone is injured, they can recover faster. Thinking this in his mind, Rob looked at the 2 bodies on the ground again. One was of an old witch, and the other was of a black man. After learning from the old witch's quick response, Rob, who knew that the black man's presence would affect his ability to take the initiative, was no longer interested in carrying a dead body. However, one still had to consider the convenience of passing through the wall of flesh and blood and slowing down the attacks of the black arms. Rob thought about it, went back to pick up the dagger and beheaded the black man next to him. I don't know when I became so calm. Holding the bleeding head, Rob, who had never dared to watch a chicken being killed before, suddenly thought of something. Soon, he shook his head. There is no other way. In this perverted world, living with a bunch of perverted people, if you don't want to be killed, then you can only assimilate. Rob came to the wall of flesh, holding the head. As usual, a corridor leading inside appeared. In that case, just move forward with your head held high. Chapter 60, Cordelia opens her third eye. Half an hour later, Rob ran into another voodoo witch. The other party had just started to chant the spell when he was turned into a gust of wind and cut his throat in a flash. The voodoo witch fell down, holding her neck in disbelief. Looking at the mere 40 shelters added to the account, Rob shook his head. I'm so stingy even when I'm dead. This was the 3rd voodoo cultist he had killed after adding points. The fighting styles are similar. After the meeting, he took advantage of his speed, approached the opponent in a narrow space in an instant before the opponent could react, and knocked him down with one blow. Even if there is someone who can react quickly, he will immediately use his mind control ability to make the other person stunned for a moment. Just like the team of 2 voodoo wizards we encountered before. One was affected by his mind control, and as soon as the other raised his hand, he rushed up to him and killed him directly. The effect of the collaboration was not at all. 3 kills were recorded, although this time only 40 points were gained, but the previous two had earned 100 points. Rob looked at his personal page. If all the harvest from the previous shelters had been used up, the information was as follows. Physique, 3.0. Spiritual, 2.3. Abilities, control of fire, mind control, health, clairvoyance. Containment point, 40. After practice, Rob felt that his current strength was enough and was thinking about saving up some shelter points to be ready for the next awakening of his abilities. A light sound of footsteps suddenly sounded from behind. Just as Rob was about to turn around, a high-temperature flame rushed towards him. Before, this might have been a hassle. But now, Rob moved his body and easily dodged the attack amid the whistling wind generated by the rapid friction with the air. Rob did not draw his knife and knock the man down as he had done before. After seeing the visitor's face clearly, he joked, "Zoe, are you trying to murder your boyfriend?" "I'm so sorry. Rob, I was so nervous." Zoe realized it was Rob after she made the move. She was feeling extremely regretful, but was surprised to find her boyfriend had dodged her. She was greatly relieved and quickly apologized. Rob waved his hand, came to Zoe, looked at her in a very embarrassed state, and asked her about her recent situation. Zoe suddenly remembered something and quickly grabbed Rob, anxiously saying, "Rob, run. There are a lot of voodoo people chasing me." A lot of people. In an instant, Rob's eyes lit up like light bulbs. In the maze of flesh and blood, the roles of hunter and prey are constantly exchanging. In the real world, the battle between the Supreme Witch and the Voodoo Witch continues. If Fiona had not prepared an isolation spell in advance, and the residents nearby who were involved were all related to voodoo, no one would be stupid enough to call the police. It is now completely unrecognizable, as if it had been blasted over and over again by countless artillery shells. I wonder how many important figures must have been alarmed by the scene. On the ruins, Fiona no longer looked like a noble lady. Panting, she pulled an ugly face and spoke again. "Whether it's the devil or the demon who will sign a contract with you and grant you immortality, tell me his name. This is the end of today. That's it? Do you think you have a sure win now? How arrogant." Mary, who was also in a bad state, wiped the blood from her mouth and laughed. "By the way, if you calculate the time for the flesh maze is almost up, and the group of young witches you brought with you are almost all wiped out now. I helped you, Fiona, shouldn't you thank me? My request is not high. Just commit suicide. You won't live much longer anyway." Fiona's face darkened, she stopped talking and opened her hand. The battle between the two started again. However, they didn't know that not far away, a group of fully armed hunters were quietly spreading a large net. More than 10 miles away. University of New Orleans Medical Center. Cordelia, leaning on the hospital bed, opened her lifeless eyes and stared blankly ahead without saying a word. She has not yet recovered from the loss of her sight. Her husband Hank, who had been by her side the whole time, peeled an apple and handed it to Cordelia, saying, "Have some." Cordelia reached out her hand expressionlessly, accidentally touching Hank's palm. Moment. Cordelia only felt her heart tremble suddenly. Then, her eyes, which had originally been unable to see anything, suddenly had an extremely clear memory. Those were pictures of Hank, of him being intimate with a red-haired woman. Not long after, Cordelia, who had been pulled out of her memory, seemed to be overwhelmed and took several deep breaths. There was no time to think about how I had acquired this extra ability. As a wife, she only felt a strong anger rising in her heart, and asked loudly, "Who is that? Who is the red-haired woman with you?" Hank was confused at first, not understanding why Cordelia suddenly got angry. Until the other party mentioned the red-haired woman. Then he thought of the red-haired woman who had the blood of a Salem witch and had awakened the ability to fire and died at his hands. In order to gain her trust, he pretended to be with her so that he could kill her in the end and complete the goals set by the Voodoo Queen and even his father. I must never tell the truth. Hank took a deep breath and calmly denied Cordelia's angry questioning. Cordelia, what are you talking about? What red-haired woman? I don't know her. Cordelia sneered a few times and pointed at her dull eyes and said, although I am blind, I accidentally awakened my third eye. I can see all the dirty things you did. After saying that, without waiting for Hank to argue, she grabbed Hank's hand again. She wanted to continue to confirm that the disgusting scene was real, but unexpectedly, the other side of the memory belonging to Hank flooded into her mind. Father, I have confirmed that Fiona will lead people to fight against the voodoo cult tonight. Very good. Whether it's the Salem witch or the Voodoo Queen's people, they are all our targets. It seems that disfiguring Cordelia did a good job. Cordelia? Disfigured. I just wanted to make sure she would need you as a husband more in the future, but I didn't expect an unexpected surprise. You are the one who disfigured my wife. Your wife? Tell me you're not truly in love with that woman. Tell me, son. You haven't forgotten her identity. And, your identity. I am a member of the Order, a warrior in the Shadow War. A war that has been fought since before the days of Salem. We are brothers in life and death, striving to rid North America of the scourge of witchcraft. I am, a witch hunter. Very good. You still remember your identity. I will let David close the net tonight. And you, my son, will leave Cordelia to you. Yes.